As they prepare to head to Qatar today for the World Cup, which starts on Sunday, they play their first match against Iran on Monday.
That picture dividing opinion in the newsroom this morning. Do they look a bit scruffy with the sort of bomber jacket and no tie? I thought it looked very contemporary and I liked it.
Is there a bomber jacket in that picture?
They were all in bomber jackets. And there was a bit of a cane. See if you can spot the cane in there. I'm not talking about Harry Kane.
Oh.
So anyway, get in touch. Any of our topics this morning, let us know your thoughts the usual way via Twitter or email.
Our top story then, Rishi Sunak warning Russia to get out of Ukraine and end this barbaric war, in his words, as he attends the G20 Summit in Bali.
Well, speaking as the summit began, the Prime Minister also criticised the absence of President Putin, directing his speech at the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, instead. It's the first time a British Prime Minister has had to come face-to-face with a Russian official since the start of the war in Ukraine.
Joining us now for the latest from the summit is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, just give us a rundown then of what's been happening from the UK's point of view overnight, given that all this happened behind closed doors with no media present.
Yeah, indeed. We're quite a long way from the summit venue, as is always the case when it comes to these meetings, particularly when you've got 20 world leaders involved, Paul. First of all, this is the first proper full day of the G20 summit. All the world leaders are here, bar one, President Putin, that, as you say, Foreign Minister Lavrov is here in his absence. And it's fair to say that actually there's almost been anonymity when it comes to condemnation of the war to a large degree. Even leaders that in the past have sat somewhat on the sidelines in this, countries like India, for example, are now saying that this war, frankly, kind of needs to come to an end. So I think it's fair to say that Russia is a little isolated, at least in terms of the diplomatic language being used. And as you say at the opening ceremony, the opening kind of meeting a little earlier on today here in Bali, the Prime Minister made it clear of his disdain for the war in Ukraine, and indeed, it must be said, for Russia itself. He told leaders that it's very simple. Countries should not invade their neighbours. They should not attack civilian infrastructure and civilian populations, and they should not threaten nuclear escalation. Surely these are things on which we can all agree. Rishi Sunak went on to say that it is notable that President Putin didn't feel able to join us here. If he had, we could have got things sorted out, because the single biggest difference that anyone could make is for Russia to get out of Ukraine and end this barbaric war. So pretty strong words there from Rishi Sunak. It follows a series of meetings that we saw yesterday, most notably, of course, between President Xi Jinping of China and President Biden. Again, while China didn't go as far, clearly, as many of the Western allies in terms of the condemnation, there was a joint agreement that in no circumstances should countries use nuclear weapons. Clearly, there's been concern that if Russia gets backed into a corner, it could do so. And in addition to that, there will be a whole series of meetings for the Prime Minister today as well. He met with Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, last night. He's meeting with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia a little later on. Also expected to meet the President of Indonesia. Speculation he could also meet President Narendra of India. And the big one, President Biden, the first meeting between the new Prime Minister and the US President. That's expected tomorrow. So another busy day. The focus is not simply just on Ukraine, though the offshoots of that are clearly important. Focus on energy security, food security as well. But the opening ceremony has been marked by those pretty strong words from most world leaders condemning Russia's actions in Ukraine.
OK, Darren, thank you very much indeed for that update. Well, joining us now in the studio is Conservative Councillor for Epping and Thaden, Holly Whitbread. Really good to have you on the programme with us again, Holly. Look, whilst all eyes seemingly at the moment over in Bali for the G20, lots of discussion in the papers this morning about domestic issues, as you'd also expect with the budget looming on Thursday. And with your speciality, actually, a lot of focus on councils, this uplift in council tax expected, and also some suggestion that a couple of councils, Tory strongholds as well, Hampshire and Kent, I believe, facing bankruptcy.
Yeah, it's a really difficult time for local authorities, particularly with the pressures around adult social care, an area which I actually work in at a county level, and that's very, very challenging, the costs around that. And actually, councils aren't immune to the pressures that we're all feeling in terms of inflation, the rising cost of living, the cost of building materials. So it is a very difficult time for councils, and it's always a really difficult balancing act, because I know actually my district council is the lowest tax authority in Essex, something we're very proud of, and always trying to protect, but equally we want to deliver the best possible services for local people as well.
Yeah, what do you think about this? Council tax will surge past £2,000 for the average household under these plans that they're talking about. And potentially the Chancellor will give councils the ability to put that up without to put up the levy by 5% without a local referendum. Is that right?
It's very difficult, and I think what councils are conscious of is that people are going to be feeling pain in a lot of other ways as well. Certainly in my authority, what we're trying to do is not increase tax as much as possible, but we are kind of aware of the realities around it. But for the last few months, we've really been working on budgets and looking where we can make efficiencies which are least noticed, actually, and also where we can bring in revenue as well. But it is a really difficult balancing act, and actually no one wants to put that pressure on local residents.
Yeah. Do you think there should be a referendum, though? Do you think that maybe people who live in those districts, in those councils, should be given a say in whether council tax goes up?
It's well, they always have a say, don't they, at the elections? And I know many authorities have. Well, I have certainly elections every year in my area because we're in third. So I think people do get that chance at local elections.
Yeah, and it's just you talk about social care and inflation, rampant inflation being big problems for councils, but also the migrant crisis has to be a huge pressure in terms of short notice, having to provide resources for hundreds. All the time. So talk a little bit about the kind of pressure that is presenting. I think the Daily Mail this morning, putting it in terms of this package, this deal that we've done with France has to succeed, not least for the nurses in society who we're already struggling to pay for as well. So there are these really difficult binary choices councils are facing, and in these price battles as well, these wage battles as well.
Absolutely, and I do welcome the deal with France, but I think even Rishi acknowledged it's only the start, and there's a lot to look at, particularly in terms of the speed of processing here in the UK. And it's a really difficult challenge. I know I'm affected in my own area by hotels being used as processing centres, and actually the biggest challenge is the impact on local infrastructure, whether that be GP surgeries, as well as education places locally, and that does put a huge pressure back on local authorities, particularly at a county level.
Yeah, and just give us an idea of how much social care is struggling in your neck of the woods.
Well, it's a huge challenge everywhere. I mean, for some councils, it's 70% of their budget, and actually it's not something that people necessarily realise that they're paying for. So I'll give Essex as an example, which is a huge county. Yeah. At any one time, it's normally around 17,000 people who are using adult social care. So actually in a county of 1 million people, that's a relatively small number, but obviously has a huge impact on everyone's tax bills.
And problems with recruitment as well, because we're going to hear about that later on in the programme. We've got a report on that. There's big problems with recruitment and unfilled vacancies. Absolutely,
particularly around domiciliary care at people's homes. That's a huge challenge, and finding people who want to work in the sector for the long term as well is a real challenge.
Yeah. Not all doom and gloom, though, ahead of Thursday, and I think the Chancellor very aware that he needs to offer some light at this really difficult time. The Times this morning leading on help for the poorest by boosting the living wage, and we're also getting lots of signals, the strongest signal yesterday from the Prime Minister yet, that triple lock will be protected for pensioners and those on benefits.
I think what's important at this budget is that, first of all, the most vulnerable in society are protected, so those who need the support, particularly pensioners, and I will welcome that triple lock announcement if it is made. But certainly, you know, what I think needs to be is that the pain is shared equally, because actually what I worry about most, particularly in my own kind of area, is those kind of people who just about managing and fall between the gaps. And that's the challenge we're seeing. I do a lot around housing. That's my cabinet portfolio at district. And we're certainly seeing more pressure on people needing social housing, needing more help. So it's the people in the middle I also worry about, and I hope there'll be support there too.
OK, really interesting. Holly Whitbread, Conservative Councillor for Epping and Thaydon and Essex. Thank you as always.
It is 10 minutes past 6. The International Trade Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, has travelled to Washington. She's there at the moment in a bid to promote trade between the US and the UK.
Delivering a speech last night to the free market think tank, the Cato Institute, she said that strong trade ties could be used to challenge authoritarian regimes.
It comes ahead of an announcement by Donald Trump tonight, where he's widely predicted to announce his run for the presidency in 2024.
Well, Professor of International Relations David Dunn joins us now. Very good morning to you, Professor. Of course, the UK very keen to try and lay the groundwork and build that relationship with Washington so that a trade deal can be done. And this will obviously be important in all of that. What's your interpretation of how it's going so far?
Well, she's trying to do all the right things. She's making a major speech. She's visiting Congress and she's meeting someone from the administration, and she's making all the right noises, talking about the need to improve supply chain, energy security. And she's made this claim that the UK and the US is the most important trade relationship in the world. If that was necessarily the case right now, you would wonder perhaps that she would meet the US Secretary Treasury, Janet Yellen, rather than her deputy. You wonder also about the timing of this. I mean, she's meeting with congressional committees while they're lame duck just before they're replaced in January. And also their choice of a speak to the Cato Institute, the libertarian right-wing think tank, is one not necessarily that's the favourite of the current administration, perhaps why she ended up meeting the deputy. So if I was organising the trip, I think I would have done it slightly differently, but she's making all the right moves in trying to make those connections.
So in your opinion, they could have organised things a bit differently, but the bigger picture is that really the Northern Ireland Protocol is central to all this as well.
Absolutely. I mean, there are two fundamental problems with in terms of getting a trade agreement between the US and the UK. And as you say, the most one is the fact that the Biden administration is holding back and making clear to the UK in private that actually the US is very concerned about the Northern Ireland Protocol, and that UK-US relations are essentially on hold on the trade relationship until the UK stops its threat to actually end that unilaterally and come to some agreement. And then the second issue, the more fundamental one in terms of the substance of it, are that the UK doesn't want to have a free trade arrangement with the US if it means that actually the UK has to import chlorinated chicken and hormone-injected beef. And in agriculture, their agricultural production is such that it would swamp the UK market and make the UK farms unproductive. So it's difficult to see how we have a free trade agreement in that area without that doing damage to the UK farming industry, rather like actually it was suggested in Parliament that the Australian deal would do to the beef industry in the UK as well. So there are some fundamental problems there in trying to actually replace the lost trade we've done with the EU by getting a deal with the Americans.
What do you make of this G20 bilateral between Prime Minister Sunak and President Biden tomorrow? The first time they'll have come face to face, and there was lots of, I don't know if you think it was fair speculation around the time when Prime Minister Truss was sort of snubbed a little bit around the time of the Queen's funeral, and they never managed to meet up, and there was implied criticism from the Biden administration of the trickle-down economics. Look, how is that special relationship, and how important will this bilat be between the two great countries tomorrow?
Well, I think ideologically speaking, it was very clear that from Biden's statement that Truss and him were far apart. Again, one of the reasons why I wouldn't have chosen the Cato Institute to do my speech in Washington. I think you can expect the mood music to be warmer. I think actually that Sunak has a better, more deft touch in terms of diplomacy. He's clearly made relations with France improve, and you can expect that with Biden too. But again, it's clear in terms of actually on the US agenda, as far as we figure that the Northern Ireland Protocol is a thing which they are concerned about. The overall relationship with Europe is much more important now than it is with the UK, and the peace deal in Northern Ireland, the perpetuation of that is of utmost importance, and therefore actually getting that sorted is high on Biden's agenda, and that will figure in any mood music that there is between the two leaders.
David, just before we mention Donald Trump, sticking with these bilateral talks that happen on the sideline at the G20, there are also reports potentially that Rishi Sunak may meet with India's Prime Minister later today, and they'll be looking for signs about a trade deal there as well. Now, we've talked about a big trade deal with the US. We're talking now about a big trade deal with India. How likely do you see that progressing into something tangible?
Well, the mood music there, just to use that phrase again, is very good. The Indians love the fact that we have an Indian heritage prime minister. There's a huge amount of goodwill as a consequence of that. But the fundamentals there are that what India wants from a trade deal is access to the UK market from Indian workers. How the Conservative Party squares that in terms of actually the desire to bring net migration down is the problem there. Obviously, the UK wants to sell more whiskey without tariffs to India, but the quid pro quo for that is that actually the UK market is liberalised and open to migration, which is not yet one that I think the Conservative Party has resolved.
Sorry to labour this point, but there seems to be two similarities there between talking to the US and talking to India, which is both require trade-offs from the UK in order to get what they want, and there's an unwillingness to trade off. In other words, to sort of give away a bit of control.
Absolutely, and that's the fundamentals with trying to replace the biggest market, which has been damaged as a consequence of Brexit, with these players that are a long way away and want things that actually are difficult for the UK government to give, rather than just actually free movement of goods across the channel.
Yeah, and what you can read in between the difference between the two countries and their reception with Rishi Sunak, with President Biden mispronouncing his name, whereas Narendra Modi actually knowing the names of Sunak's daughters. That was how close that relationship was. I think read into that what you will. I just wanted one final question to you. Lots of signalling from Donald Trump that there was going to be a big announcement this evening at Mar-a-Lago. Lots of people thinking he was going to throw his hat in the ring for the next presidential election. Do you think he'll still be so keen to do that after the failure of the red tsunami last week?
I think that it's almost a bet in certainty that Trump will declare today. I mean, his prospects are slightly damaged by the events we had on Tuesday, but I think there's a number of reasons why Trump will declare. The first is that he wants to get ahead of the field. So his main rival, Ron DeSantis, has just been elected governor of Florida. He can't immediately then say, by the way, I'm not going to spend the next 2 years governing Florida. I'm going to spend the next 2 years running for president. So he has to wait. So Trump wants to get ahead of the field by declaring early and getting his position out there. He also sees it as a way of making lots of money for his various dubious organizations. Trump has actually benefited financially hugely by raising money for his causes, that means him, over the last few years, and he will continue to do the same thing. He also sees it as a way of actually avoiding the 6 legal claims that are being carried against him, prosecutions being carried against him, and he thinks that actually by declaring himself to be a candidate, that he will be part of the political process, and therefore the Department of Justice will be less likely to come after him in those legal cases. The 6th of January assault on the Capitol, there's attempted to swing the election in Georgia, and various the chewing up and flushing away and hiding of documents. All of those things are potentially ones that could come after him, and Trump thinks that by being a candidate he'll avoid those. And the last thing is, the man has an enormous ego. He is a narcissist. He loves the attention. And actually, to be back in the news and to be the subject of GB News' morning programme is exactly what fuels his ego.
Yeah,
so I think he will run. Whether he gets the nomination is less certain, although he has a huge amount of base, and whether he wins depends who goes up against. As you said, Biden can't remember people's names, and he's old and tired, and whether he can campaign or not is another matter. So if it's Trump-Biden, much closer. If there's a generational change in the Democratic Party side, and they choose someone with more vigour and actually just a new figure who hasn't got the baggage of the last 2 years of Afghanistan and the economy and everything else, then I think the prospects are very different. But if it's Trump-Biden, then I'm not betting any money at all, I'm afraid.
Yeah. David, really good to get your thoughts this morning. Thank you, David Dunn, Professor of International Relations at the University of Birmingham. It's going to be fascinating to see what that announcement is. It probably is going to be around. It is, isn't it? We'll be talking about this tomorrow morning. We're going to hear lots more nicknames like Rhonda Sanctimonious. Yeah, exactly. Right, 6:20. Let's bring you up to date on the rest of this morning's top stories. And the Prime Minister has said that pensioners are at the forefront of his mind, strongly hinting that he would keep the pensions triple lock in place in his Thursday autumn budget. State pensions increased by just over 3% this year after the triple lock was suspended. Elsewhere this morning, a new report suggests less than half of NHS trusts will meet key waiting lists and cancer targets as services buckle under increased pressure. At present, NHS England figures show 62% of people get cancer treatment within 62 days, compared with 77% before the pandemic.
Major supermarkets have co-signed a letter urging the government to expand free school meals to all children from families in England who receive universal credit. In the letter, the retailers warn of food insecurity rising in the coming months and call on Westminster to do more to protect children and to help struggling parents. Now, Paul, lots of our listeners and our viewers will be avid readers of TV Choice, and they had their annual do last night, bit of a red carpet do, so I was there flying the flag for GB News, which was really lovely. Got to put a nice frock on and go and chat to the celebrities of the world.
That's a big dress.
It was a big dress. I did a little selfie before we went out, and actually my 7-year-old took that picture. I was pretty impressed. But everybody asking...
Is that above the TV? Is that kind of bull?
It is, yeah. I don't know what that is.
That's quite cool.
I don't think it's real.
Sorry. Anyway, yes.
Yes, and everyone asking after Eamonn, so I thought I'd give it a little update because I saw him at the weekend. And
how is he?
Doing well. Yeah, doing really well. And he was really sad not to be able to make it. He was supposed to be on the red carpet with me last night, and it was a real shame not to. But we are hoping he'll be back in the new year. Yeah. So he's making progress, and he's looking really, really well.
Good, that's really good to hear.
Crossed, yeah.
Yeah. If you're watching Eamonn, good luck, mate, and keep the recovery going, OK?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a break now. After that, as the Prime Minister draws up plans to fund social care, we'll take a look at the crisis in the sector. But first of all, here's your Tuesday weather.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. More wind and rain on the way this morning. And later on for northeastern areas, heavy rain in places, but brighter skies will follow in the west later. Areas of low pressure still dominating our weather at the moment. Those areas of low pressure sitting to the northwest, swinging at first an active band of rain in a weather front, which is likely to cause a few issues across southern counties of England and South Wales as the rainfall accumulates to 30 or 40 millimetres in places. The wettest weather moving out of the way of these areas, though, pushing into the east of England, northern England, central and eastern Scotland by the afternoon. And once again, that will build up over some of the higher parts of eastern Scotland, Aberdeenshire, Angus, Perth and Kinross, likely to see 50 to 60 millimetres in places. That could cause some issues. Brighter skies, though, return to the west, 13 or 14 Celsius in the south, 11 or 12 in the north. And Northern Ireland sees a lovely afternoon, but for Wales and the southwest, any gaps between the rain short-lived because further showers arrive here. Those showers spreading across most of the UK by the end of Wednesday, but the more persistent wet weather in the northeast, well, that lingers across Shetland, where the winds will really be ramping up during Tuesday and into Wednesday, gales or even severe gales. Otherwise, it's a blustery start for many on Wednesday. Some gaps in between the showers and some sunshine first thing. A fresher start for many, but not exactly cold. And we're going to see further showers arriving from the west and southwest through the day. So there's going to be frequent showers along the south coast for parts of Wales, western Scotland as well. But away from those showers, for many it's a fine afternoon. There'll be some sunshine out there, certainly looking brighter and drier compared with recent days. But for Shetland, we keep the very strong winds and the heavy rain. It will stay windy here throughout much of the rest of the week. Elsewhere, there'll be further spells of rain, followed by showers, followed by more rain. It will be blustery at times, and also temperatures will be coming down.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Welcome back at 6:26. Still to come on the programme this morning.
At 6:45, after a man became the first person in the UK to be convicted of using an Alexa to spy on someone.
Knew it.
We'll ask an expert how you... Is that because you were spying?
No,
we'll ask an expert how you can protect yourself from snooping smart devices.
Then in an hour after that, 7:45, is the inner part... Autocue's taken off the word D. It's the dinner party, not the inner party. I don't know what that is.
It's the inner party on the way out.
It's a political party. It's the dinner party on the way out. Cost of living crisis is really making it more expensive than ever. We've got etiquette coach William Hanson on how you can still be the host with the most without breaking the bank.
Even economising with letters in words. That's how bad the
inner
cost of living crisis has got. So, yeah, dinner parties. Get your views in gbviews at gbnews.uk.
Now, as the Chancellor prepares to announce a plan to fund social care, a new survey has found that over a quarter of care workers are likely to leave the sector in the next year.
Research conducted by independent care provider New Cross Healthcare and YouGov found staff shortages and low pay to be the top issues.
Well, our national reporter, Theo Jacumba, takes up the story.
Good night, campers.
Full of life at home, 15-month-year-old Maher has congenital central hyperventilation syndrome, meaning she loses control of her breathing when she's asleep, ill or tired, requiring ventilation and specialist care 7 days a week.
It has made an immense contribution to the quality of life that we are living right now, considering the condition Meher has to live with the rest of her life. We are very grateful the amount of care that we are getting, the quality of care that we are getting from New Cross. We can surely sleep peacefully that we know Meher has been in the safest of the hands.
It helps us just be her parents, and of course it's very different when you're in the hospital. It's a very different setting, and no matter how much time we get to spend with her in the hospital, you can't really exist as a family. So with the care that we're getting from New Cross, it enabled us to come back home and just exist as a normal family.
Everyday carers like Lara are here supporting the family, monitoring Maher's airway overnight and checking up on her hourly.
This is Maher's daytime ventilator, which she uses when she gets out and about.
Whether it's here, at home or at nursery, the team provide clinical care when needed.
It's so important to be able to look after these children at home. When I was nursing 20 years ago, I looked after a child with the same condition in hospital, and she lived there for 7 years, which was really, hard for her as well as her family and for the nurses looking after her. So to be able to look after Maher at home and be able to get her home by the time she was 4 months old was just amazing.
While Lara, Vanessa and Jess are still in the industry, others are leaving. Decreasing staff levels and pay are crippling parts of the care industry. Here at New Cross Healthcare, they're hoping their findings can be a wake-up call to both the sector and the government.
People that work in this sector, nurses, carers, they really care about the people they take care of, and they want to give them the time that they require to give them just wonderful care, wonderful patient care. But when you are understaffed, you are under-resourced, then unfortunately sometimes care can be compromised. I believe that's one of the key reasons, in addition to some pay issues, is why people are leaving the sector.
While the cost of living is causing more pressure on staff, industry leaders say reform is needed so staff can continue to give care to families like Maher's. Theo Chkomba, GB News.
Bless her. Big problems for the care industry with recruiting enough staff. It is 6:31. After the break, we'll be going through the papers with Norman Baker and Claire Pearsall, so stand by.
I'm standing.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back at 6:33. Time to bring you up to date with the latest headlines this hour. And ahead of a meeting of the G20 Summit in Indonesia, the Prime Minister has said the UK and its allies are taking steps to bolster their security in the face of increased Russian threats. In a statement, Rishi Sunak announced a new £4.2 billion contract to build 5 more ships for the Royal Navy, due for completion in the mid-2030s. The project will support 1,700 jobs in Scotland.
A former Tory MP jailed for groping a 15-year-old boy will challenge his conviction at the Court of Appeal. Imran Ahmed Khan was sentenced to 18 months after being found guilty of sexually assaulting the teenager in 2008. The victim came forward when Khan won his seat in Wakefield, West Yorkshire in 2019. Khan denies the allegations.
Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says he'll travel to Qatar to attend the World Cup. It comes as Mr Cleverly's faced criticism for telling gay fans to not protest whilst visiting the country, as homosexuality is illegal there. The Foreign Secretary says he's attending because it's his job to ensure British visitors stay safe.
Right, let's go through this morning's papers. Joining us is former Liberal Democrat Minister Norman Baker and former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. Morning to you both.
Morning.
Norman. Morning, Claire. Let's start with you, Claire. In the Express, Richie gets it. Pensioners at forefront of my mind.
This
triple lock.
The triple lock, and will please quite a lot of the Conservative electorate. I would assume that's what he's going for. I think it's right that we look after pensioners. I think the problem he has is when you're talking about those pensioners who are perhaps incredibly well off, still working, and don't need quite the amount of assistance that the government is giving. But I do think that for the majority, the triple lock was a manifesto promise. He is quite right to keep that in. We don't understand how this is going to relate to those on benefits, because it was always a case of, do you look after the pensioners? Do you look after those claiming benefits? That's a little bit unclear, but I think that this is one of the sort of surest signs that Rishi does understand what needs to be done, does understand what a manifesto promise is, which we've not seen for a long time. So I think this is a really positive view from him, and I think Norman is desperate to come in, and he's going to disagree.
A lot of pensioners are wealthy. You've said it a lot of times on the show. Of course, a lot aren't. I think about 20% of pensioners are really struggling. But I think there's a greater proportion of poverty in working households where there are often children than there are of pensioners who won't be getting this package.
It would be outrageous if benefits didn't go up in line with inflation, and pensions do, because as you say, there are a lot of rich pensioners. There are people who are pensioners living in the south of Spain getting no fuel allowance. That cannot be right under any circumstances. And look, this is not about paying a debt to pensioners. That's how the government dresses it. This is about votes. This is because people who are of pensionable age, by the way, I'm 65, so I'm going to get my pension very shortly. This is about making sure that people who are pensioners, who by and large vote Conservative, continue to vote Conservative. That's what this is about.
Well, there needs to be a bit of politics, doesn't there, in all of this, because they're delivering a very difficult-to-swallow budget, aren't they, on Thursday, or autumn statement, and there has to be a little bit of thinking about the election. Otherwise, it's going to be a disaster for the Conservatives.
Well, of course, you always need to have one eye on that, but also it is right to look after some of the most vulnerable in the country. And as you say, there is this big divide. There are those pensioners who are still working and that can afford to live their lives and heat their homes, but there are a majority that can't. And I think to forget that part of the population is just wrong.
And actually, to bring that in takes us to the story that Norman wants to focus on, which is the Daily Telegraph. Households face steep increase in council tax. And this increase in council tax is to pay for social care, a lot of which goes on caring for the elderly.
Well, look, I'm in a cynical mood this morning. This is about shifting blame for increases in the cost of living onto local councils, or whatever colour they happen to be, because the government wants the councils to be blamed. It's not a new tactic. It's been going for 50 years. The government's loaded councils with responsibilities. But of course you've got to pay for social care. But one of the problems is that there isn't enough money, even with 4.99% increase for social care. And councils, and I used to lead a council in Lewis, councils have been hollowed out. The capacity they had to deliver services and make real choices has by and large gone. This isn't a party point. It's the same for whatever council is run by whatever party. It's terrible. But what's happened is, because councils are so stretched for money, the statutory services have to be funded because that's a law, and anything which is non-statutory, it's gone by the board. So, for example, I'm interested in buses in my campaign for better transport role. They're not a statutory function, so buses are being slashed. 50% of council bus services have been cut in the last 10 years. It's terrible.
And news in one of the papers this morning, I'm not sure which, that two Conservative-run councils are on the brink of bankruptcy, Kent and Hampshire. That can't happen. What happens if that...
Well, I mean, and this remains to be seen. What does happen if a council goes bankrupt? It is completely unprecedented, and I don't think that the government quite understand what that means either. It's the front page of the Guardian, and it's actually my County Council leader, Roger Gough, for Kent, and Hampshire's leader, Rob Humby, have written a letter in the strongest terms saying, what do we do when it comes to this? And because, as Norma said, the statutory requirements upon these councils to provide education, healthcare and all of those services, child services, adult services, what happens if they physically cannot afford to fund it? I don't think it's as simple as going to the council taxpayer and saying you need to pay at least £100 more a year. That isn't going to cut it. When you're looking at millions and millions of pounds in debt, this is really quite serious. And I don't think that anybody has thought what the solution is, but also if this can actually happen or not.
Norman, what have you heard from your contacts about potentially other councils, not just Hampshire and Kent? Is this the tip of the iceberg?
Well, look, councils are delivering, in many cases, very poor services, not because they're incompetent or because councils don't know or care what their electorate is going to get your money. And you know, in my area, we've now got a shared chief executive. We've got one enforcement officer for planning infringements across two authorities. We used to have 3 or 4 per authority. They can't do anything. There's no capacity there anymore.
But equally, residents cannot afford to continue paying more and more council tax for less and less return.
No, exactly right. That's exactly right. And unfortunately, what's happened is over the last last 12 years, and this is partly due to the coalition as well, I might say, that councils have taken the brunt of cuts from central government. And while people have been able to defend, say, the defence budget, the Defence Secretary is quite active at defending the defence budget, people have defended the health budget, no one's been really standing up and defending the council budgets, and the consequence is they've had the worst cuts. But they deliver essential services for local people. And I think, Claire, I'm not, unless my memory's wrong, didn't Northamptonshire go bust due to incompetence actually rather than anything else a while back?
They did, yeah. I mean, there was some misuse of funds. It was all sorts of problems up in Northamptonshire, and they were taken over almost in special measures as schools are. So I wonder if that's kind of the same. I don't think it was quite on this scale, though.
No.
But yes, there is that precedent been set for that council and was taken over, and they seem to be recovering slowly. But it is 2 enormous councils that we're looking at, and I suspect there will be more to come. I can't see that these will be the only 2.
No, they won't be. And, of course, the social care underfunding, which won't be sorted by, as you rightly say, won't be sorted by this, feeds into the health service, because what we have is all sorts of what used to be called bed blocking. People don't like the term, but effectively people can't be released from hospital. They're sitting in ambulances, they're sitting in corridors for hours and hours because people who should be discharged cannot be discharged.
Yeah, councils are struggling, everyone's struggling.
Public services creaking,
And that's why front page of the Times, Rishi Sunak will help poorest by boosting living wage, which is great for those employees, but for employers, it's an added cost.
It is an added cost, but those employers will still need to employ people. So I think that it's not quite as bad. When the living wage was introduced, I know that there were the concerns that if you introduce this, then people would lose their jobs, there would be mass unemployment. And, of course, that didn't happen. So I think...
Does this not stoke inflation, though? And I think it was always hard if you're saying you're helping the poorest to criticise it for stoking inflation. But we're all being told, aren't we? Nobody can have a pay rise because it's inflationary.
Yes, I mean, as to what degree it's going to affect inflation that already hasn't happened. I mean, I think this is sort of a drop in the ocean in comparison to other measures which do increase inflation, much more. I think this is great. What I am concerned about are those people in the middle who are not getting benefits, who are being squeezed for more money every single time. And they are the ones at the moment who are going to be hit hardest by this. So, yes, we need to look after the vulnerable, but don't forget those in the middle who will just not be able to cope.
There's talk of this 8 million households getting cost of living payments of up to 1,100. Is that in addition to the energy bailout that people are being...
this is extra money to help those households. And it's one of those things that was always mooted around and is targeted better, which is always what the government wanted. I think it's a very complicated system to try and help households. Everybody has to get it, or you have to spend a lot of time working out the means testing process. So I think they are starting to do it, and it will be targeted better, which is exactly what it needs to be. As we said, we don't need very, very wealthy pensioners getting all this money when they don't need it, and there's somebody living hand-to-mouth with no heating.
The one point Claire is absolutely right on is that people who are often in work and doing essential jobs like nurses are now visiting food banks because of the cost of living. So this food banks has traditionally been for people who've been out of work and have got little money. You're finding people now who are employed going to food banks. That's the status that we got into. So there is an issue, there is a real issue about people on relatively low wages not able to afford basic necessities.
And you mentioned nurses there, which leads us on to a story you've chosen in the Mail this morning, Norman, about nurses being forced out of hotel rooms to make way for asylum seekers. And the argument is that this deal with France really has to work. Otherwise, it's nurses that will pay the ultimate price.
Yes, well, it's right that we've got to deal with France. I mean, they are our closest neighbour. The government's been quite rude to France unnecessarily for about 5 years, and Rishi Sunak appears to be trying to correct that, which is useful. He's doing that. In terms of this is a catastrophe for the government to be forcing nurses out of...
This is foreign nurses that the Home Office were putting up whilst they were training to try and plug the shortfall in nurses, and they're being given a month's notice, is it?
And also the RNLI have got people in hotels who also they're volunteers who are being trained to save people from the seas, who are being forced to leave a hotel in the Wirral, which is rather ironic. So this is not a good story for the government. The basic point is that the number of asylum seekers coming into the country, which, by the way, is quite low compared to the European average. We would take far fewer asylum seekers than, say, Germany or France. But the people coming in are not being processed properly or quickly enough. And they should be processed much more speedily. And there's a huge backlog. And that's the root of the problem. If you had people who were processed quickly, then this problem would largely go away, in my view. And also, I've always taken the view that people who are waiting for a claim to be determined, why don't we let them work rather than be able to claim money? Why don't they work?
Yeah, Claire, there seems to be a number of problems here exacerbating the other problems, and they're kind of focused around hotels. The hospitality industry is suffering a recruitment crisis, right? And then we've got migrants backing up and having to be put in hotels, which are then replacing nurses, which have come here to train because there's also a recruitment problem in the care sector. There's it's like a myriad of problems coalescing around hotels.
It is a complete house of cards. And I think the problem is that hotels are very expensive. People don't want their hotels to be taken up. But at the moment, with the hospitality sector as it is, some of those hotels wouldn't be in business. And I think we have to look at the cold, hard truth on this, that some of them require this. But what is unacceptable is that we have asked for migrant workers to come, train, be nurses. We want to look after them. We want them in our health service. They're now being pushed out by other asylum seekers and migrants and refugees who haven't got the ability to work. And I do disagree with you, Norman. I'm really sorry, but you can't actually give them the right to work as soon as they come into the country. It causes you so many issues. They have a footprint within the state. It means that they will be entitled to certain benefits. So whilst their claim is being progressed, to allow them to work causes you more problems than it solves.
The trouble
There's real technicalities with this.
I understand that. The problem is that some of them are waiting over a year to be
And they
processed.
are allowed to work once
well,
their claim has been... if they haven't had their claim assessed within 12 months, they are allowed to work as long as it's on the shortage occupation list.
Yeah. Well, 12 months is a long time to wait. And I come back to the root issue. If they were processed within a month or 3 weeks, they wouldn't have to work. Because it'd be...
We should state, both of you have had experience in the Home Office, haven't you?
Yes.
You were a minister in the Home Office and you were an advisor, so you both know this subject intensely. When it comes to why it's taking so long to process these asylum claims, is it to do with this slavery law and this loophole that Theresa May introduced and is being abused quite cleverly, some argue, by particularly perhaps Albanian illegal migrants?
There is certainly a part that it plays, and you have to look at those kind of claims very carefully if there is any sort of slavery, trafficking type allegation being made. But I think the major problem is trying to find out the identities of individuals in the first place, work with the countries that they have come from. Quite often, if you're looking to get paperwork and confirmation from like Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, that's incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
These countries don't work quickly. So there are an awful lot of things to put in place. But I think also that we just don't have the caseworkers with the knowledge to do the claims in the first place, and they are very, very difficult.
Paul, you've recently been to one of the camps, haven't you, in Dunkirk, where there were lots of people backed up waiting to come to the UK, and you spoke to a guy who'd been working in Germany and been booted out by the Germans, wanted to come to the UK, but because he'd lost all his papers in, where was it, Iraq, under Saudi?
In Iraq, So essentially he's now trying to get to the UK on one of these boats, so he can, but he doesn't have the paperwork, and he's hoping that the authorities over here can somehow get hold of his paperwork in Iraq because the Germans haven't been able to. He's kind of documentless.
Yeah, and I think this is the problem, is that so many people almost become stateless in this respect because they can't get the paperwork requirements from their own home country, so they're hoping that the British government, the German government, the French government, whoever it may be, can fix that. And that is where your real difficulty lies, because those countries aren't going to hand over those details, and they're going to say, give us the person back. And you're in a real
Just
situation.
quickly on what you were saying about why they shouldn't be allowed to work while they're waiting for the asylum application process. I do understand that. But is it not within the government's power to allow them to work but not claim benefits?
The problem is to come into our system, you need some kind of identification for a start. So you're looking at, you need identification, you'll be given a national insurance number in order for payroll to be supporting you through. And if you don't have that document, we've all started a job and we all have to give national insurance number, dates of birth, passport numbers, you name it, pieces of identification. If you don't have that, it's very difficult.
Is it not possible then to enforce the general principle that you can't claim, but we're happy for you to pay?
But I think the problem is it automatically does that. You start having a national insurance number.
I see what you mean, OK.
You're automatically then enrolled in that system, and that's where it could lead to abuse. it couldn't in some cases, but, you know, I think there is an enormous risk. And look at the population in the United Kingdom who need to get a job as well.
Yeah.
So you start to have those real difficulties, and I think communities will pull apart even further if they start seeing people taking over on this.
And just lastly, because we do have to move on to our next segment, but Suella Braverman, controversial character, lots of criticism sometimes of her language. But do you get the sense, Norman, as a Liberal, that she really wants to try and sort this problem out? Because it is a huge problem at the moment.
I get the sense that she feels there's a political necessity to sort it out, and there certainly is, because I think it's hemorrhaging votes among Tory voters. I think, to be fair, it's Rishi Sunak who wants to sort it out rather than Suella Braverman.
Okay.
Norman, Claire, thank you very much. More from Norman and Claire in the next hour. It is 10 to 7.
And do let us know your thoughts on any of those topics. We love to involve you in all of our discussions, of course. Now, households have been warned that criminals could be using smart devices to spy on people in their homes. Such a creepy story, this.
It comes after a serial sex offender became the first person in the UK to be convicted of using an Alexa to snoop on his victim, prompting safety concerns amongst MPs.
Well, joining us now to discuss this is technology journalist Will Guy. Very good morning to you, Will. You see, this is the sort of thing that I've just instinctively felt was always going to come out as a possibility. How on earth has this worked? What happened in this particular case? How was this man spying on his victim?
Let's just start by saying this is a very, very rare edge case. This is the first example of this I've ever heard of. And essentially what's happened here is somebody has had access to a home. They've managed to get access to the Alexa in that home, as in physically being in the home. They've managed to connect that Alexa to their Alexa, and they've been able to listen to what's going on in that home. Now, they've had to get access to the house. I'm not suggesting the other person knew all the time that they were signing that up, but this happens, and on these occasions where this happens, people often link their smart devices, their connected devices up to other people's connected devices, and forget that when they no longer want them on there, they can remove them. But what this does mean is that there is a growing risk that these devices that are listening to you all the time to get what you're saying in order to play you the latest songs or the latest podcasts or whatever you're using them for, can also hear what else you're doing in your house, because it has to. It's essentially the way these things work. They're listening to you all the time in order to wait for you to trigger them. That's devices from all kinds of companies. Now, this isn't a specific security flaw with the Amazon Alexa, which is what it felt like to me the MP was suggesting, but it does highlight the dangers of these connected devices. There's always the risk that somebody else who you might not know still has access to your device, or you might not realise has access to your device, could potentially be listening to you.
Can I just read you this statement from Amazon? They've previously said that they're the people who make the Alexa devices. Echo and Alexa devices are designed by default to detect only the sound waves of your chosen wake word, and everything else is ignored. All other audio passes through the device until the wake word is caught and sent to Amazon's secure cloud, where the request is reanalysed to verify the wake word was spoken. In other words, it's listening to one word or maybe 2 or 3 words, but nothing else. Do you believe that?
It's tricky because we've had cases where the FBI, for example, in the US have asked for audio, and audio from Alexas and other connected devices have now been used in court cases. Whether or not it's listening just for that word and how it's processed, I'm afraid you'd have to have an expert from Amazon or from one of the other companies to talk you through that. But what I would say, it's a reminder to anybody, if anybody has a connected device in your room, it has the potential to listen to you. Now, for many people, that's genuinely not a concern, because what are they doing in their property? But in this case, and it was a particularly horrific case, the idea that somebody had managed to connect their Alexa, their device, to somebody else's and was able to use it long after those two people had stopped having connection with each other, was used for terrifying and sort of stalkerish terms. But that's not what everybody uses these devices for. That's the most important thing to say here. This is a horrible but edge case of how they're used. And unfortunately, with all this new kinds of connected technology, things like AirTags, which you connect to your keys, I can lose my keys, and it's really helpful for me to find them in this mess of my house. But at the same time, other people can use them to stalk people. So all this technology can be used for bad purposes as well as good. It's good that this news has come out today, which means that people can think about who they've got connected to their smart devices and how they're using them. But I don't want everybody to panic.
But, OK, aside from the sort of sinister side notes to some of this tech, what about the sort of corporate, cynical misuse of them? I mean, are people listening to us, I say people, organisations, to try and sell us stuff, use adverts? And because sometimes it feels like you're just discussing a topic and the next thing you know, an advert pops up on your TV. Is that our imagination,
I'm sure Amazon
or is that happening?
I'm sure Amazon and other companies would be very upset about me saying this, but the reason Alexa exists is to sell you more toilet roll. That is essentially why it exists. It's a piece of technology that they've built to sell you more products. It does all these other amazing things, but it's getting data from you all the time. And essentially it exists to help you order more products from their stores. The technology is getting better and better. It will be used in more and more applications. But go back to the root that there is a company behind this, and the company has a means and an aim and a plan to use your data.
Yeah. Well, really good to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
As always, thank you very much. You know what I love using my Alexa for is whilst I'm cooking, and I'd be lost without it now. I set my alarms, 2 minutes on this or 4 minutes on that. I can't remember how I lived without that, to be honest. You just get an egg timer, old-fashioned egg timer.
I was going to say, that's what I did. I set the timer on my phone.
You've got your oven gloves on, or you've got your stirring, you haven't got your hands free. Whilst you're cooking. It's very handy.
Yeah, it doesn't always work, though, and I find myself shouting at it sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes you have to repeat yourself and then you feel a bit
Especially
mad.
if you're...
And then my kids repeat it. They go, Alexa! And I'm like, don't be rude.
It is very good when you're driving in the car and you want to put on a certain song and you just say, play this certain song, and then it does. Of course, when it doesn't, you end up shouting at it.
Yeah.
So...
Well, as with all these things, they have pluses and minuses. Let us know if you love your Alexa or not. We're going to take a break. After that, more of your top stories. See you in a moment.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. More wind and rain on the way this morning. And later on for northeastern areas, heavy rain in places, but brighter skies will follow in the west later. Areas of low pressure still dominating our weather at the moment. Those areas of low pressure sitting to the northwest, swinging at first an active band of rain in a weather front, which is likely to cause a few issues across southern counties of England, South Wales, as the rainfall accumulates to 30 or 40 millimetres in places. The wettest weather moving out of the way of these areas, though, pushing into the east of England, northern England, central and eastern Scotland by the afternoon. And once again, that will build up over some of the higher parts of eastern Scotland, Aberdeenshire, Angus, Perth and Kinross, likely to see 50 to 60 millimetres in places. So that could cause some issues. Brighter skies, though, return to the west. 13 or 14 Celsius in the south, 11 or 12 in the north. And Northern Ireland sees a lovely afternoon, but for Wales and the southwest, any gaps between the rain short-lived because further showers arrive here. Those showers spreading across most of the UK by the end of Wednesday, but the more persistent wet weather in the northeast, well, that lingers across Shetland, where the winds will really be ramping up during Tuesday and into Wednesday, gales or even severe gales. Otherwise, it's a blustery start for many on Wednesday. Some gaps in between the showers and some sunshine first thing. A fresher start for many, but not exactly cold. And we're going to see further showers arriving from the west and southwest through the day. So there's going to be frequent showers along the south coast for parts of Wales, western Scotland as well. But away from those showers, for many it's a fine afternoon. There'll be some sunshine out there, certainly looking brighter and drier compared with recent days. But for Shetland, we keep the very strong winds and the heavy rain. It will stay windy here throughout much of the rest of the week. Elsewhere, there'll be further spells of rain, followed by showers, followed by more rain. It will be blustery at times, and also temperatures will be coming down.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio, and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News Channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Rishi Sunak confronts Russia's foreign minister as he addresses the G20 Summit in Bali.
A very good morning. It's 7:01. It's Tuesday, the 15th of November. You're listening to and watching Breakfast on GB News with Isabel and Paul.
Our top stories this morning then, the PM criticising Vladimir Putin for not attending the G20 Summit. He's given a speech in which he challenged Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, the first time a British PM has faced a Russian government official since the start of the Ukraine war.
Sunak has also announced new defence projects, including what he calls the next generation of British warships, with 5 new vessels to be built for the Royal Navy at a cost of £4.2 billion.
Council tax will surpass £2,000 for the average household for the first time under new government plans. The increase, due to be unveiled on Thursday, would be used by councils to fund social care.
And a picture of the England football squad has been released as they prepare to head to Qatar today for the World Cup. They play their first match against Iran next Monday.
Lads.
And you're going to be there, aren't you? Covering it for us.
Yes, yes.
We look forward to all of that. Let us know what you think. Do you think they look a bit slouchy and informal in their open neck shirts? I think they look contemporary and cool.
Yeah, they do. I'm a bit disappointed they didn't go for the old school, you know, where you're on benches and maybe the guys at the front.
With a football on his lap.
When you got the football on your lap, the goalkeeper's in the middle, and then the ones at the front, they're on bended
Kneeling.
knee.
Oh, I love it. Like a school
Bended knee.
photograph. Yeah, old school. On any of those topics, loads of you, and I mean loads of you, getting in touch this morning on pensions. Really pleased about the triple lock, assuming it does get honoured on Thursday. We'll try and reflect some of those views in just a moment. Keep them coming in.
So it's 2 minutes past 7. Let's get more then on Rishi Sunak warning Russia to, quote, get out of Ukraine and end this barbaric war as he attends the G20 Summit in Bali.
Yeah, speaking as the summit began, the Prime Minister also criticised the absence of President Putin, directing his speech instead at the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. It is the first time a British Prime Minister has come face-to-face with a Russian official since the start of the war in Ukraine.
Well, let's get the latest from the summit. Let's go live to Bali, speak to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is there for us this morning. Darren, we've seen Rishi Sunak's facial expression described in the media this morning as glowering, and obviously we weren't able to see it, so the mind boggles. Just give us a rundown of what he's been saying.
It didn't look terribly happy when we think that the Foreign Minister Lavrov was speaking. But as you say, the summit this morning was somewhat dominated by the issue of Ukraine. And I think what was fascinating, it wasn't just the Prime Minister and indeed Western leaders who were piling in, condemning Russia, but actually to a large degree, even those countries that have been relatively non-aligned in the past didn't seem terribly happy. Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India, for example, saying that the war needed to come to an end. But the Prime Minister was pretty strong in terms of his words today, Paul. He said it is very simple that countries should not invade their neighbours, they should not attack civilian infrastructure and civilian populations, and they should not threaten nuclear escalation. Surely these are things on which we can all agree. And Rishi Sunak went on to say that it is notable that President Putin didn't feel he was able to join us here. Maybe if he had, we could get on with sorting things out, because the single biggest difference that anyone could make is for Russia to get out of Ukraine and end this barbaric war. And of course, it is not just the military operation that leaders here are talking about in Ukraine and Russia's actions there, but also the consequences it's had in terms of food security, energy security in many parts of the world, and also the impact it's having on the global economy. Those are the two big themes today. Clearly, the war in Ukraine's had an impact, but so is the COVID pandemic as well. It's all about recovery, if you like, here at the G20. And as you say, away from the main summit meetings, as always in these circumstances, leaders get a chance to talk to other world leaders. Really important for Rishi Sunak, isn't it, given the fact that this is his first proper major world summit, a chance to introduce himself to many world leaders he's not previously met before. He's meeting the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia a little later on today. The big ones are tomorrow, though, the Indonesian president, the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, a big moment, I would suspect, for both of them. And then the really big one, which was for President Biden, the US president, the first time that they have met face to face. So it will be a really important summit for Rishi Sunak. Lots of the focus on those big global issues. But interestingly, I'm going to get a chance to speak to the Prime Minister a little later on today. And while that focus here is on the big global challenges, on the economic conditions across the world, clearly there will be a lot of domestic focus as well, Paul, not least of all because we've got that big autumn statement when he returns on Thursday. Some key decisions the Prime Minister is going to have to make that could well set the tone, if not the entire kind of way forward for his premiership. But at the moment, he's currently having lunch with those G20 leaders. He'll be meeting with the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. As I say, it's a chance for him to try and make an impact on the world stage, just a month or so into the top job.
And a big job for him to do there. Darren, just before we let you go and talk a bit more about domestic politics here, I just have to talk about where you are, because obviously as part of your job, you travel the world. We've spoken to you from the Colosseum in the past with prime ministers, but that has to be up there with one of the most spectacular locations for a political broadcast.
It is, can I just say, though, it is raining. So it's not all sunshine and fun. It is raining at the moment. But yes, I mean, it's fair to say that Bali's not been the toughest assignment, even if the time difference makes it a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, we can see one of your friends there has got their umbrella up, actually, so that must be why. Darren, really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you, Darren McCaffrey, live for us in Bali.
The heart bleeds.
G20 Summit, yeah, indeed.
Tropical rain, still lovely, isn't it?
Interesting as well, they're talking a lot about politics there, because normally the G7 is reserved for kind of politics and diplomacy. The G20 is normally about economics. I know the Indonesian president was complaining that they're focusing too much on politics, not enough on economics.
Right, interesting. Well, we're going to focus now on domestic politics. Lots of economics in that for you. Let's speak to the editor at the news website, Tortoise, Kat Neelan, regular on the show. Good morning to you. The paper's full of lots of things that we can expect from Thursday's budget. And we've talked a great deal about pensions and the triple lock. It certainly seems as though that is going to go ahead. But perhaps more surprisingly is the council tax angle that's beginning to creep through this new narrative that council taxes, one of the papers quoting that they're going to be £2,000 average bills for people, and this is to fund social care.
Yes, so over the weekend we started to see some sort of hints about what might be in the budget. Jeremy Hunt saying it's going to be rabbit-free, which is a big red flag because, of course, chancellors love to keep back rabbits to say, well, look, we're doing all of these nasty things, but here's some nice things. I don't think there's going to be many nice things. The council tax rise, we knew that it was probably going to go above the 2.99% usual limit. 5%, though, is a big jump. And, yeah, £2,000. Now, this is very important, as you were talking about with some of your previous guests, because there are a couple of councils that are looking at possible bankruptcy. And that means, although they wouldn't actually fall over completely, they would stop funding a lot of key services. And so this is kind of, I think, probably a bit of a plea from some of those local councils to try and get a bit more money and perhaps give some political cover for that actually happening.
Have you heard anything about more councils potentially getting into difficulty, like Kent and Hampshire?
Not specifics, but of course, a couple of years ago we had Croydon, and I think they're still sort of looking a bit iffy. I'm not sure that's a technical term, but you know. And there are others. Councils have really suffered the brunt of austerity 1.0, and could now be looking down the barrel of austerity 2.0. And of course, we all rely on a lot of the council services. You know, it's not just things like libraries, schools, and things like that. You know, it's very important that councils get the funding that they need, not least if there's more expectation in terms of social care to be funded from their depleted coffers.
Yeah, it really is worrying this morning. What else has caught your eye in terms of what's coming out on Thursday? I thought it was really interesting, this line about 5 new warships that is being announced by Rishi. Now, cynically, is this to try and sweeten the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, who's been very bullish in trying to get his 3% of GDP increase by the end of 2030? That's not likely to happen in this budget, is it?
No, I think this is exactly that, trying to head off. Of course, Ben Wallace and his junior minister, James Heappey, have both indicated that they would resign if the 3% wasn't committed to. I think there are ways that can be kicked into the long grass. You know, 2030 is obviously at least 2 elections away. But having the commitment of building warships, of course, warships was a sort of big focus of the integrated review that came out under Boris Johnson, and it's sort of big part of the sort of British naval tradition. So I think you're right. That is a sort of a bit of a trying to keep people on side. Of course, the last thing you want is the Defence Secretary to be resigning in the middle of a war.
And he's very popular as well with all wings of the party. He's done so well, hasn't he, with Ukraine? So you can see why. They're trying to keep him happy.
Yeah. Kat, thanks for speaking to us.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Thank you. Kat Neelan from Tortoise Media there. While we've been on air, the latest employment stats have broken from the Office for National Statistics. 75.5% for July to September, largely unchanged on the previous quarter and 1.1 percentage points lower than before the coronavirus pandemic. We can speak now to economist Jack Kennedy, who joins us now. Jack, what do you make of these figures?
Yeah, the labour market remains incredibly tight. We have seen a little bit of signs of softening in the latest figures. Vacancies coming down just slightly in the latest 3-month period, but remaining close to record highs. The unemployment rate ticking up just slightly from 3.5% to 3.6%. But certainly the labour market does remain extremely tight for the time being.
And what does that mean in terms of employers, in terms of sectors? I mean, who's really struggling at the moment?
Yeah, so it means that hiring conditions are challenging, really, across a range of sectors, particularly a number of lower-paid sectors that have really seen the strongest rebound in vacancies from the pandemic. Certainly the distribution sector, retail, manufacturing, construction and hospitality are certainly continuing to find recruitment conditions pretty challenging.
Yeah, and particularly the hospitality industry, would you say, out of most of them?
Yeah, hospitality is certainly one of the ones that's been finding it difficult. I think one of the key things that we've really seen in the labour market is this elevated rate of inactivity. We've seen a lot of workers dropping out of active participation in the labour market, and that's continuing to fuel a lot of these hiring challenges. We see in the latest ONS data today that inactivity rate continues to be elevated. Certainly long-term sickness rates and the withdrawal of older workers from the labour market continues to be quite a distinguishing feature that's contributing to these hiring challenges.
Yeah, the Great Resignation, as it's called, and the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, talking about that over the weekend, 600,000 people absent from the labour market in the post-COVID world. How do we entice those people back into the workplace, or are they never going to come back?
I mean, they need some support, I think. A lot of these people, particularly people that aren't participating because of long-term sickness, they may need some adjustment from employers as well as support from policymakers. Usually when we've seen older workers dropping out of the labour market, few of them do tend to return. So once people have retired, we don't see many people coming back into the labour market. Clearly, we are in a cost of living crisis, and a lot of those financial pressures that we're seeing at the moment could be a factor drawing some of those people back in. But a lot of those older workers that aren't working anymore are less exposed to rising mortgage rates. More of them own their homes outright. So it really kind of remains to be seen the extent to which that's much of a factor.
I think there's something like 6 million people on out-of-work benefits, and many of those, of course, things with injuries or disabilities. But a proportion of those, the government have to try and target, don't they, to try and get them back into employment. I was reading over the weekend around 1 million could be reabsorbed back into the workforce. I mean, how does the government tackle that? I mean, that, again, has it got to be incentives?
It does, yeah, and they need support as well as incentives. They need help sort of finding work in acquiring skills, upskilling, reskilling to get back into work. Because it's certainly a factor that's really starting to hold back the UK economy at the moment, and it's really quite a constraint on growth because so many companies, so many employers are struggling to fill these staffing gaps, and it's really putting quite a big brake on economic growth at the moment.
Yeah, and just very quickly, the number of employees decreased in these latest figures. Self-employed workers increased, so there's going to be implications there. Why do you think that is?
I mean, we've seen a lot of people reappraising their choices during the pandemic and what they want out of work. So some people have been choosing to do new things. So we have seen more people leaving stable careers and trying something new, starting up a business. So that may well be part of that.
Yeah, potentially part of the gig economy. Jack, thanks for your thoughts this morning. Really appreciate it. Thank you. It is 7:15. Let's bring you up to date with some of the other top stories this morning.
The Prime Minister has said that pensioners are at the forefront of his mind, strongly hinting that he could keep the pensions triple lock in place in Thursday's autumn budget. State pensions increased by just over 3% this year. That was after the triple lock was suspended.
The new report suggests less than half of NHS trusts will meet key waiting list and cancer targets as services buckle under increased pressure. At present, NHS England figures show 62% of people get cancer treatment within 62 days, compared with 77% before the pandemic.
Major supermarkets have co-signed a letter urging the government to expand free school meals to all children from families in England who receive universal credit. In the letter, the retailers warn of food insecurity rising in the coming months, and they call on Westminster to do more to protect children and to help those parents who are struggling.
Lots of you getting in touch with us this morning on pensions, on Kemi Badenoch, the Trade Secretary, who's over in the US at the moment.
Yeah, where do you want to start on views?
Start with pensions.
Start with pensions.
Yeah.
OK, Lynn's saying it should be remembered that today's pensioners are those in society who'd previously trodden the path of life, just as the younger people of today will do. Why do pensioners in Spain get winter fuel allowance when this payment was stopped for Brits in North Cyprus years ago? Hardly fair.
Yeah, Jane says council tax should be revised. Bring back the poll tax. Controversial, Jane. A much fairer way as everyone who uses the services provided pays, not just householders.
David says we pensioners in Spain do not get the winter fuel payments. These were stopped years ago, so we need to check that out because there's conflicting information there on whether those are happening. Paul says if we have to pay for all these illegal migrants, then it should come from the foreign aid budget.
Yeah,
interesting.
And actually, John is kind of in agreement there. Councils are going bankrupt because of the public services they're having to provide to illegal migrants. The truth hurts.
Keep those thoughts coming in. As I say, so many this morning on pensions. It really seems to have captured your imagination, and presumably lots of you very supportive then of that strong hint from Prime Minister Sunak that he will be honouring the triple lock. Now, to other news this morning, the Chancellor's preparing to announce a plan to fund social care. A new survey has found that over a quarter of care workers are likely to leave the sector in the next year.
Yeah, it's alluding to what we were just talking about with Jack there. Research conducted by independent care provider New Cross Healthcare and YouGov found staff shortages and low pay to be the top issues. Our national reporter Theo Chikomba has the story.
Good night, campers.
Full of life at home, 15-month-year-old Maher has congenital central hyperventilation syndrome, meaning she loses control of her breathing when she's asleep, ill or tired, requiring ventilation and specialist care 7 days a week.
It has made an immense contribution to the quality of life that we are living right now, considering the condition Meher has to live with the rest of her life. We are very grateful the amount of care that we are getting, the quality of care that we are getting from New Cross. We can surely sleep peacefully that we know Meher has been in the safest of the hands.
It helps us just be her parents, and of course it's very different when you're in the hospital. It's a very different setting, and no matter how much time we get to spend with her in the hospital, you can't really exist as a family. So with the care that we're getting from New Cross, it enabled us to come back home and just exist as a normal family.
Everyday carers like Lara are here supporting the family, monitoring Maher's airway overnight and checking up on her hourly.
This is Maher's daytime ventilator, which she uses when she gets out and about.
Whether it's here, at home or at nursery, the team provide clinical care when needed.
It's so important to be able to look after these children at home. When I was nursing 20 years ago, I looked after a child with the same condition in hospital, and she lived there for 7 years, which was really, hard for her as well as her family and for the nurses looking after her. So to be able to look after Maher at home and be able to get her home by the time she was 4 months old was just amazing.
While Lara, Vanessa and Jess are still in the industry, others are leaving. Decreasing staff levels and pay are crippling parts of the care industry. Here at New Cross Healthcare, they're hoping their findings can be a wake-up call to both the sector and the government.
People that work in this sector, nurses, carers, they really care about the people they take care of, and they want to give them the time that they require to give them just wonderful care, wonderful patient care. But when you are understaffed, you are under-resourced, then unfortunately sometimes care can be compromised. I believe that's one of the key reasons, in addition to some pay issues, is why people are leaving the sector.
While the cost of living is causing more pressure on staff, industry leaders say reform is needed so staff can continue to give care to families like Maher's. Theo Chkomba, GB News.
And such a tricky issue. Look, we're going to take a break. After that, we've got all the sports news. Aidan McGee joins us this morning as England is preparing to fly off to Qatar for the World Cup.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week, at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back at 7:24. Still to come on the programme this morning at 7:45. As the season for festive dinner parties approaches, we'll be asking etiquette coach William Hanson how to throw a memorable bash on a budget.
It's also anti-bullying week, and new research has found that a quarter of children are bullied frequently. At 8:45, we'll ask a 15-year-old anti-bullying ambassador what examples he thinks we, adults, grown-ups, should be setting for young people.
And as ever, we love to hear from you throughout the programme. GB Views at gbnews.uk.
So England are off to the World Cup today. They're flying out to Qatar for the World Cup, which starts on Sunday. The first game is on Monday, and they've released this picture, which I think we can see now, potentially.
Oh,
what
fabulous!
A dramatic pause for basically it's an. Let's be very clear. It's an M&S shot, isn't it?
It's very casual. I see what you're doing there. Sort of country casuals. They're in their bomber jackets. You've got Gareth Southgate wielding a cane in the middle, which I don't know what that's symbolic for. Aidan McGee joins us in the studio.
And let's keep the photo there while we talk to Aidan.
Yeah, I mean, Harry Kane should be carrying the cane, in my view. But the M&S suits, it was Burton back in 1966, top man in 2002. I think they've had M&S for a little while now.
That is the angle on the World Cup I've never heard. And did you pull that straight out of your
my bank of knowledge? Yeah, back catalogue of Norwich. I was at university in Norwich, so that's in the brain. But no, my back catalogue of Norwich. Yeah, I remember. Well, the 2002 grand reveal was dominated by Sven-Göran Eriksson because he'd been carrying on with Ulrika Johnson. So the suits actually didn't get a mention.
Oh, right.
I did actually get. I do remember it being top man that year. Yeah.
Yeah, but what do you make of that photo, which we can see again?
Yeah,
in
it's a bit Grange Hill, isn't it? It's a little bit Grange Hill, but it's. I quite like it. I mean, the fact that James Maddison's kind of, on the left-hand side. I don't know if this was kind of done on purpose for artistic reasons, but he's almost looks like the late cover, doesn't he, from the left-hand side, if we see him on the top left there, just slightly detached. But it does indicate that the fact that he's standing up is positive because he was injured on Saturday against West Ham, wasn't he? Yeah. So the fact that he's standing up means he's probably fit.
Yeah. Is it lads? Can we call it lads? Lads.
I guess so, yeah. I guess so. I mean, look, it's thrown together, but that's been choreographed, no question about it.
Look, there's so much pressure on those lads, as you like to call them. They're all smiles now. Is that a winning team? Are they going to have a good time?
What I've always said, Isabel, is that teams that win major tournaments, they don't tend to do it out of the blue. There tends to be a trajectory leading up to it in tournaments. You look at Germany in 2014, their journey started in 2006. That's when they started reaching semis and finals and began knocking on the door. England are through that process now. 2018, semi-final, probably should have beaten Croatia based on the first half performance, didn't quite get over the line. It was a young squad. They went again. They did so in 2021, 3 years later. Obviously, the Euro 2020 was delayed. And goodness me, they were, 80 minutes away? Well, I say 80 minutes. They were 1-0 up after a few minutes. They tactically got it wrong after that. But again, knocking on the door. And this is different. This is almost a lottery of a World Cup in some ways because the conditions are slightly different. The training facilities, yes, the stadiums will be temperate and they'll be air-conditioned, but what's it going to be like to train? Because, you can't control the heat everywhere you go. No. We're having a World Cup in an area the size of Yorkshire. There's the whole politics leading up to it. It's in the middle of a season. Are the players going to be super fresh because they've just literally finished playing their league season? Or are they going to be knackered because they played so many games? There are so many imponderables to consider. Is it a winning team? The ability is certainly there. There's no question about that. But as with England, the ability's been there before. We think back to the golden generation in the middle of the 2000s. They proved themselves no more than the quarter-final team. And so the best team doesn't always win the World Cup either. So maybe England could go there as not the best team and still win. This is my prediction, right? I think everyone's been slagging off this World Cup big time. If England go and win it, which I think they might do, then we'll all say it's the best World Cup ever, won't we?
Yeah.
Oh, right, so you're not making a prediction about England winning it, though?
I think England will win it, yeah, easily.
No,
easily.
will they win it?
Yeah, I think they will.
You really
I do.
England will win
There's
the World
something
Cup?
we could win the most unpopular World Cup ever, and we'll be talking about and buying barbecues for the next 50 years. Yeah, down at Tesco's, hoping for a repeat. We'll think of the great old days.
And we should mention, how will Wales do? Because Wales is
This is a big story.
Wales is a fantastic story. First World Cup since '58. This is big.
64 years, yeah, exactly. So look, it's different for Gareth Bale because Gareth Bale is their main player. He's their talisman. He means so much. Just him being there lifts the whole squad. But they must learn from history as well. Look at England. How many times have we bought players who weren't quite fit? Gareth Bale's played 28 minutes since the last round of Nations League games back in September. His injury is so important, his fitness is so important that it's actually quite hard to ascertain what his actual injury is. No one's even bothered to find out. We think it might be a mix between knee, calf and thigh. It's very difficult to find out what the actual ailment is. It's about whether he's going to be there or not. We remember David Beckham going to the 2002 World Cup. We all put our hands on the front of a copy of The Sun trying to get positive energy into his metatarsal to fix him.
That. The Prime Minister even said for his metatarsal.
I know. Embarrassingly, I had my hand on his metatarsal as well. 2010, we rushed Rooney back, didn't we, back in the springtime. It didn't really work. He didn't really look fit enough for the World Cup. And it's a really intense schedule as well. You're asking these players to come off the back of serious injuries and then play 3 games in 10 days, I think it is. I mean, Gareth Bale has said he'll be fit to play every minute of the first 3 matches if necessary. They kick off, of course, against USA on Monday, the same time England play against Iran.
Yeah, and I do think Wales will beat England.
Do you?
That's my prediction, yeah.
Is it?
I just think Wales will be so up for it, and they're so together that I just think that
the thorns between 2 roses might be the USA. They've showed a lot of improvement in the last year. They've got some good calibre players. They're not quite the team they were in maybe 10 years ago, but they'll be up. They've been completely written off, and I think they might have something to say.
So your prediction, England's going to win the World Cup.
I think
Your prediction, Wales is going to beat England in the first round.
I've just got this feeling Wales are going to beat England, yeah.
There you
They
go.
called up 2 players from League Two. I mean, they're not in fantastic shape. They've done well to get there.
Yeah, be interesting.
Well, all to play for. Aidan
Yes,
McGee,
plenty more to discuss as well.
Same time tomorrow. Look forward to it.
Cheers, Aidan. Thank you. 7:31 after the break, we're going through the papers with Norman Baker and Claire Pearsall. Stand by.
Standing by.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip
of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Welcome back.
It's 7:35.
It's synchronised time checking.
I'm going to take this away. Let's bring you up to date with the top stories this hour. And the Prime Minister has called on the Russian president to end the invasion of Ukraine. In his G20 Summit speech, Rishi Sunak addressed the Russian foreign minister, saying that the weaponisation of energy and food is totally unacceptable.
The rate of UK unemployment rose to 3.6% from July to September. That's up from 3.5% in the previous 3 months, according to the Office for National Statistics. Economic pressures are a factor in employers' decision to hold back on recruitment, with the biggest driver behind the fall coming from hospitality.
The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, says he'll travel to Qatar to attend the World Cup. This comes as he's faced criticism for telling gay fans not to protest whilst visiting the country where homosexuality is illegal. The Foreign Secretary says he's attending because it's his job to ensure British visitors stay safe.
Let's go through the papers then with former Liberal Democrat Minister Norman Baker and former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. Morning to you both. Welcome back. Let's start with you, Norman, because Labour's idea to try and plug this big hole in the public finances is taxing companies more like Google and Amazon.
Well, I mean, they've got plenty of money and they're making huge fortunes, as indeed are some of the energy companies, and the non-DOMs she also refers to who don't pay taxes properly. So on the basis of what he said, that makes some sense. Now, interestingly, Jeremy Hunt has said he wants those with the broader shoulders to pay more as well. So we may find that some of these ideas are actually reflected in the budget on Thursday. The thing about Google and Amazon, of course, is they are international, multinational companies. It becomes quite difficult to tax them in this way. They just reorganise themselves and go somewhere else. So you have to find a way to tax them for their activities in this country that they cannot escape from. I have to say, it would have been easier to do it in the European Union level, but of course that's no longer an option for us.
Well, it's not a particularly conservative approach. I mean, you'd expect this from Labour, but I don't know if I can see this being adopted by the Conservatives, because, of course, if you make it unappealing for business in the UK, then ultimately your public services suffer in the end.
They do, and this will be famous last words. Raising taxes is not particularly conservative, but it does look like that's going to happen on Thursday. I think that the government might be minded to look at something like the big companies, Amazon, Google, and look at what we can do with that taxation. But I don't think they'll be very keen to putting new taxes on, non-DOMs, and it's a really tricky area for Conservatives. It's a really tricky area in tax law as it stands. And as Norman has just said, you start going after these companies, they will just find a loophole and they will go elsewhere. So it's not particularly good for business in the country. If you think how much we all rely upon delivery companies, especially coming up to the festive time of year and what we did during the pandemic, it kind of cuts both ways.
Yeah.
I think we need to be mindful of that. I think that there needs to be a responsibility on those companies to offer to pay a bit more tax. They're not going to. but I'm not sure we need legislation for it.
I have to say, every interview we do with the Shadow Cabinet at the moment, they bring up the non-dom argument. And my reply is always just pointing to under François Hollande in France, when he went after non-dom, non-taxpayers, and they just upped sticks and all came to the UK. So is there a danger that that would happen if it was to be brought in here?
I would say so. I mean, these people have this status for a reason, and they'll just take their money elsewhere, and they will go. You're not going to get it if you keep going after them. I think there needs to be better ways of dealing.
Yeah, Norman?
Well, it's just a risk. Certainly they'll go elsewhere. So you have to design a system, I'm not saying it's easy, design a system whereby they can't take their money elsewhere, or if they do business in this country, you are able to nail them. Look, there are certain taxes which are very difficult to avoid. VAT, obviously, because you buy stuff in the shops, you can't avoid that. You can't really avoid council tax very easily. You probably can't avoid inheritance tax that easily either, although it's probably easier to do that. So you find a tax which is difficult to avoid, and non-doms are notoriously difficult to tie down. But nevertheless, there is an equity issue here. There are people who are on quite low salaries are paying quite a lot of tax. Others who've got lots of money are not paying tax.
The top
very much at all.
1% of earners pay 25% of all taxes, though. I mean, that's a huge burden that they're already sharing.
Well, I mean, they've got plenty of money, a lot of people. I mean, and if you remember Liz Truss, Karma Kwasi's budget, which is a disaster, what he was going to abolish the top rate of tax, a 45p rate for those who have £125,000 or more. I mean, we saw how that went down with the public at large, and indeed went down with the Tory party as well. I mean, you know, people want equity, they want fairness, and that clearly wasn't fair. Non-doms, in a way, not paying tax of any sort of magnitude is not fair either. So the challenge is, can we find a way to get some money out of them without having them leaving the country and going somewhere else?
Well, Labour would say, because they've been banging on about this non-dom policy for a while now, and they say it would raise at least £3 billion, and they're basing that on the University of Warwick study, which looked at the changes George Osborne made when he was Chancellor, and he effectively gave a 2-year notice period to non-doms, and HMRC introduced policies whereby they could change their tax affairs so they'd stay in the country, but they'd also end up paying less tax. So what I'm saying is the devil will be in the detail about how Labour would introduce this policy and how much notice they would give non-doms. Otherwise, it wouldn't raise much.
No, the devil is in the detail, that's exactly right. But, you know, the thing is, people like being in this country. It's a nice country to live in. I like my country, and others like coming here as well. So, you know, people will put up with a certain amount of extra payment to make for the basis they want to be here. So, you know, if you push them too far, they'll leave the country. But they won't leave the country if it's a small increase, I don't think.
Yeah, interesting.
Should we talk about His Majesty? There's a beautiful photograph on lots of the front pages of the Daily Mail, actually by Chris Jackson, who we've interviewed in this programme before, a Getty royal photographer, leaning against a tree in Windsor Park. But this came on the day. He made some rather sweeping changes to his deputies.
He did, and I think he's quite right to do so. So you've now changing the councillors of state who could stand in for the monarch should he be indisposed. And it was a limited pool of people, and it would normally, it's the first 4 adults in the line of succession, which I think we can all see is a little bit tricky when it has Prince Harry, has Prince Andrew, it has Princess Beatrice, who's not controversial but isn't a working royal. So I think he's right to put in Princess Anne. I think she works incredibly hard. I think it is only right that she takes that mantle up. I think it's been so appallingly wrong that she hasn't been able to do it because she's a woman. I think that's pretty appalling. She is so hardworking, and I'm pleased to see that the King has taken these decisions. He's pushed it through. It's not a new thing. It's been around for a few weeks now that it was mooted around that he was going to do it. But I think if you are not a working royal, then you shouldn't have that privilege of being a councillor of state. It is quite as simple as that. And if you live in California, you aren't going to be here on hand to be of service should you be needed.
But will it be a red rag to a bull in the form of the Duchess of Sussex?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think all of the things that have been going on at the moment with television programmes and books, I think at the moment she will be wise to keep this one to herself. I don't think that she is that stupid that she would kick up a fuss. But, you know, I'm happy to be corrected on that.
Well,
I don't think so. I think that there is enough going on without her making a fuss over it. And I think that Prince Harry may well just go, calm down, we need to accept this and move on.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I have to say that Claire's absolutely right. I totally agree with what she just said. But personally, I'm disappointed because, I mean, Prince Harry and Prince Andrew have been great sales agents for my royal book. They've been pushing it very hard.
Yeah, they're pushing a lot of things, including like certain landmark TV series on streaming services. And he also made himself, his birthday present was, I'm going to be the new Ranger of Windsor Great Park.
Is that right?
Apparently so, yeah. So he's now, so if you see him around Windsor Great Park, say hello. Norman, front page of the Times.
Yes.
Xi and Biden give peace a chance.
Well,
there's a nice picture of them shaking hands.
Yes, and counting fingers afterwards, perhaps. I have to say that give peace a chance is a rather over-egging the pudding, I think, in this particular case. What's happening here is that if you look at the difference between the climate and the weather at the moment is being made by Russia, unpleasant weather. But the problem with the climate, if you like, is China in the longer term. And what President Biden has done, probably quite sensibly, is to try to detach China from Russia as far as he can in the short term. They've agreed, for example, that Russia shouldn't be threatening the use of nuclear weapons. So he's trying to get an agreement with the Chinese on these matters and to isolate Putin. Diplomatically, that's right. But let's not forget that China itself is a pariah state under Xi Jinping. They've got effectively concentration camps going on for the Muslims in Xinjiang. They've basically eradicated any independence, and including religious independence for people in Tibet. You know, it's a nasty, nasty government, the Chinese government. But you have to deal with these people because they are the second most powerful country in the world, and you can't not deal with them. And also Biden's got not just Russia to think about, but also he wants to make progress on climate change, and the Chinese have to be part of that. So I don't think he'll be, you know, sending Xi warm Christmas cards. Might send him a Christmas card, but he won't be very warm.
Yeah,
a cold Christmas card.
A cold Christmas card.
Norman calls it over-egging the pudding, this headline about give peace a chance. The FT taking quite a different headline, Claire, saying Taiwan tensions overshadow their meeting yesterday. It went on for 3.5 hours, I'm told. But the other headline to come out of it is that there will be no new Cold War, which is, you know, reassuring.
I was going to say, I mean, that's the positive that we have to take away from it. And I think that we are quite fortunate that that is the case. And none of us want any escalation and any more tension and wars. But I think it's always going to be a difficult relationship. And Norman's right that we have to have these conversations with states that perhaps we really wish we wouldn't. You can't ignore them. But I'm not convinced that this is going to last all that long. I think if we can prevent war, that's great. I'm not sure there'll be any motion on climate change coming out anytime soon. And we always have to be very, very wary of any kind of surveillance from China. I don't think that that's going to stop. So this is, it's a start, and it's more positive than we've seen for a long time. But I'm not that hopeful that we'll get too much out of it.
Yeah, Taiwan will continue to be a flashpoint, won't it? Page 11 of the Mirror, Norman. Council finally puts a foot right with slippers giveaway.
See what you did there.
What's this all about?
Having said that local councils are strapped for cash in the previous hour, I have to say this strikes me as a rather bizarre story whereby in Northallerton, which by the way is in Rishi Sunak's constituency,
in
the council in Northallerton has got something called a slipper social in the branch library, when they get old people rounded up, I guess, in some sort of shape or form, and they offer them free slippers on the basis that not any old footwear, but special anti-slip slippers. Well, that seems a contradiction in terms to me.
They're not slippers then, are they, if they're anti-slip?
No, they're non-slippers.
Shoes.
Non-slippers. They have got, they're not backless, if you want the details. You've got rubber soles, which is designed to stop people falling over and slipping around.
Well, that's good.
I'm loving the level of detail in this story.
That's a bit of fun. And it's to encourage them to meet and have a cup of tea and biscuits. And it's all about community.
It's important about connecting and reducing the levels of isolation for our people.
Yeah, no, I don't mind it. Just the idea of having anti-slippers.
Yeah, it's a bit of fun.
It's a bit weird. And just finally, page 12 of the Daily Mail, Claire, Heinz means a huge increase for ketchup as brand prices soar. Is this according to Daily Mail sources?
Oh, like nice, nicely done.
I've done that joke before.
Oh, have you?
Surprising. Very sad.
I think we always get these stories coming out whenever there's a cost of living crisis, and it's always the basics that we go to see how things have increased. And Heinz tomato ketchup is up by 53%. And when you start looking at, these are the staples that you put in your shopping basket, you don't particularly think twice. And now suddenly when you're looking at that kind of increase, and the same with spreadable butter and with milk, there's 35% and 38% increase. You start to look at the cost of your shopping. And I remember many years ago being able to do it sort of £50 if I really scrimped and saved and didn't have much cash. I couldn't do that these days.
It's difficult now.
It is really difficult, and these are real basic things. Butter, there's nothing on here on this particular list that the Daily Mail has given us that is anything luxurious.
So just to clarify, they're calling ketchup a staple. Tomato sauce a staple.
I'm calling it a staple. I don't think they are. I wouldn't like to put that up.
You have to have ketchup.
Or HP sauce. But there's another debate.
Spreadable butter has already eye-wateringly expensive. I can't imagine how it can get more expensive. How much has that gone up by? Did you say something like 30?
That has gone up by 35%.
Oh. So you'll have to have non-spreadable butter
which
means you've got to manage your butter situation.
Oh, you see, and there's the technicalities of leaving it out, putting it in the fridge. I mean, to make life more difficult for everybody.
This is terrible. Norman Baker, Claire Pearson, we'll leave it there. We'll have more from both of them just after 8:30. But for now, let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines as we approach 7:50.
Ahead of a meeting of the G20 Summit in Indonesia, the PM says the UK and its allies are taking steps to bolster their security in the face of increased Russian threats. In a statement, Rishi Sunak announced a new £4.2 billion contract to build 5 more ships for the Royal Navy, due for completion in the mid-2030s. The project will support 1,700 jobs in Scotland.
A new report suggests less than half of NHS trusts will meet key waiting lists and cancer targets as services buckle under increased pressure. At present, NHS England figures show 62% of people get cancer treatment within 62 days, compared with 77% before the pandemic.
A former Tory MP jailed for groping a 15-year-old boy will challenge his conviction at the Court of Appeal. Imran Ahmed Khan was sentenced to 18 months after being found guilty of sexually assaulting the teenager in 2008. The victim came forward when Khan won his seat in Wakefield in West Yorkshire in 2019. He denies the allegations.
Major supermarkets have co-signed a letter urging the government to expand free school meals to all children from families in England who receive universal credit. In the letter, the retailers warn of food insecurity rising in the coming months and call on Westminster to do more to protect children and to help struggling parents.
Right, how to hold festive dinners but still meet the cost of living challenges. That's what we're talking about next. Because a new poll has found that 9 in 10 of us are just as content being served microwave meals from the shops as we are with a gourmet home-cooked meal.
And 8 in 10 of us say arriving with a bottle of wine for the host is totally unnecessary. So is this the right way to do it as the cost of living crisis continues to ramp up? Let's ask etiquette coach William Hanson a lesson on how to do this on a budget, because quite frankly, there are... You can't really turn up if somebody's providing you with a meal empty-handed, but if we're all feeling the squeeze, how do you do a dinner party on a budget?
The hostess gift one is an interesting one, because I would always say turn up with something, but it doesn't have to be that expensive, even if it's something you've made, some homemade biscuits or something with your own sugar, flour and butter, which should be relatively cheap, or certainly cheaper than a bottle of wine. But if not, if you don't turn up with something, write them a nice thank you letter. Cost of a stamp and a little card, and actually being grateful. But the idea with the dinner party, as opposed to sort of going out to a restaurant, is that if I have, let's say, the both of you over, and I cook for you and I provide the meal, you then, within about 6 months, then have me to your respective houses, and I then get 2 free meals, as it were, off the back of that. And it's sort of, that's how it's meant to work itself out. And this sort of reciprocity, I think, has been lost a little bit. People don't necessarily understand that if I have you over, you have me over, or if you can't have me over, then you take me out for a meal, or even if it's just breakfast, just sitting in a cafe, a high street cafe, having a croissant.
There's no such thing as a free dinner party. You are expected to return the favour. Fair enough.
You all right with microwave meals? Because I can buy in a great macaroni cheese if you're interested.
Lovely. Good. Well, you do that. That's fine. I would be absolutely fine with whatever you served me. I mean, I don't have a microwave, so you won't be getting a microwave meal at mine unless you can heat it through in the oven.
Right.
But actually, the point I think with the microwave meal is that actually food is important at a dinner party, but it's not the most important thing. The more important thing is just having a nice time and the atmosphere and how your guests are feeling, not what you serve them. I think programmes like Come Dine With Me have perhaps sort of skewed it rather unfairly and too much pressure that people feel the need to do this gorgeous concoction of food, and actually very rarely do you remember what you ate.
Yeah, just a plate of Twiglets would be
Well,
fine.
as my parents have got older, to be fair, it sort of overwhelms my mum, the thought of preparing a dinner party for 8 friends. So what they've got into the habit of doing with their little circle of friends is to do sort of 6 o'clock drinks with nibbles. So they'll do some little smoked salmon, and instead that's less pressure on mum, less washing up.
Yep.
And they've got that little system going, which I think is quite a nice way of getting around it if it's overwhelming, because that can be one of the things, isn't it? You spend all day Saturday chopping when you've been at work all week, and then all day Sunday clearing up.
Yes, and I think it's also how you brand the evening as well. If you call it come round for a kitchen supper, for example, already the pressure's off. Kitchen supper, certainly to me, it's sort of a lasagna or something, a moussaka, stick it in the middle of the table, maybe serve some cheese afterwards. You haven't really had to sort of prepare that. And just have a nice time with a bottle of wine, rather than a dinner party, which perhaps sort of invokes the candlelight supper type of thing with all sorts of
reciprocity, I think I've said it right.
Reciprocity.
Yeah, reciprocity that you were talking about when it comes to... It kind of alludes to what Martin Lewis was talking about a few days ago when it comes to present buying, which is maybe have an agreement not to buy presents so you don't have to then buy them for everyone else, and in that way you cut down. Should we be thinking about that when it comes to entertaining at all?
Yes, yeah. Just communicate. If you're not bringing something, saying, and you don't have to bring anything. That said, I mean, it is the expectation. I would say most hosts think that you probably would turn up with something. You can send something afterwards, or, as I say, just a nice letter, enthuse about the party and get a date in the diary pretty quickly to get them back.
Do you think it would be sad if Britain started to see the back of dinner parties, the death of dinner parties as it's being declared in some corners?
Oh, completely, yes, because I think there's, even from a business point of view, sometimes there's a lot of soft business that goes on.
Well, the Camerons famously hosted these Notting Hill, what do you call them, kitchen suppers, didn't they? Exactly that. We heard about Cameron in his number 11 Downing Street flat having the Notting Hill set round for a slap-up kitchen supper. And as you say, look, the Bamfords or whoever coming round and deals being done.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a lot of sort of soft diplomacy that can happen over a kitchen supper or a dinner party. I don't think it's the death of them. I think it's all cyclical. I think they will come back in the end. Hopefully, if the cost of living crisis abates, then I think sort of people will go back to that. Because actually, there is nothing nicer, and it's fairly priceless, just having a nice time with a group of friends.
The ultimate dinner party, of course, Christmas Day. I mean, everybody has one of those, don't they? And you can't ever wave goodbye to that. We can't be having microwave meals on Christmas Day, can we?
Can we? Well, some people have to.
Some people have to, yeah. And again, if you're not a very good cook, if you don't want to do it, you're working on Christmas Day, then yes, just stick something in the microwave or the oven that's sort of pre-done.
Yeah. Or the air fryer.
Yes, they're very popular now.
Yes. Come round to that's it's sort of rage at the moment, isn't it? But I mean, I'm saying it's the rage. There is a practical point that why it's so popular, isn't there? But you could invite people around for an air fryer meal.
Yes, I would just make sure you've practised. You don't want to sort of mess up the turkey in the air fryer on Christmas Day. If you've only got one turkey, have a practice, have a dry run.
Yeah, there's a shortage of turkeys as well, so it's not like you can get a spare one. William Hanson, Executive Director of the English Manner and Etiquette Coach. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. It's 7:56. After the break, we'll have more on Rishi Sunak's second big challenge on the world stage as he attends the G20 today.
I'm just going to write William a thank you letter for that before I get struck off. Yeah.
All right.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Rishi Sunak confronts Russia's foreign minister as he addresses the G20 Summit in Bali.
Very good morning to you. It is 8 o'clock on Tuesday, the 15th of November. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Paul Hawkins. Your top stories this morning.
The Prime Minister has criticised President Putin for not attending the G20 Summit. In a speech, he challenged Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, the first time a British PM has faced a Russian government official since the start of the Ukraine war.
Sunak has also announced new defence projects, including what he calls the next generation of British warships, with 5 new vessels to be built for the Royal Navy at a cost of £4.2 billion.
Council tax is to surpass £2,000 for the average household for the first time under new government plans. The increase, due to be unveiled on Thursday, will be used by councils to fund social care.
And this picture of the England football squad has been released as they jet out to Qatar today for the World Cup, which starts on Sunday. Their first match, though, is on Monday against Iran.
Get in touch the usual ways. We'd love to hear your thoughts throughout the programme. Send us a tweet or you can email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk. So good morning to you. Our top story this hour, Rishi Sunak has warned Russia to get out of Ukraine and end this barbaric war as he attends the G20 Summit in Bali.
He was speaking as the summit began. The PM also criticising the absence of Vladimir Putin directing his speech at the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. It's the first time a British Prime Minister has come face-to-face with a Russian official since the start of the war in Ukraine. Well, our political editor Darren McCaffrey has been in Bali for us this morning.
Well, the G20 here in Bali is well and truly underway, with world leaders gathering here this morning. Apart from one, of course, President Putin, who isn't here, but all the others are. And it has been the issue of Russia and Ukraine that has frankly dominated the opening remarks made by world leaders, with almost unanimous condemnation of the war in Ukraine, not least of all from our own Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who at those opening remarks said that it is very simple, that countries should not invade their neighbours, they should not attack civilian infrastructure and civilian populations, and they should not threaten nuclear escalation. Surely those are things we can all agree on. Rishi Sunak went on to say that it is notable that President Putin didn't feel able to join us here. Maybe if we had, he could have sorted things out, because the single biggest difference that anyone could make is for Russia to get out of Ukraine and end this barbaric war. Now, it must be said, we've also heard from, as I say, other G20 leaders today, many that have condemned the war in Ukraine, and even those that have previously been non-aligned, essentially sat on the sidelines, have also condemned some of the action. We heard from Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, saying that he wanted to see an end to this war as soon as possible. Now, all in all, those leaders are going to have meetings on the sidelines today as well. For example, Rishi Sunak is going to meet with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia a little later, though the big meetings for him are somewhat tomorrow's meeting, the Indonesian president, who is hosting this summit, but also the Prime Minister of India, it's reported, Narendra Modi, and then the big one, President Joe Biden as well. But it is fair to say it is the war in Ukraine and its consequences that so far dominated this summit. Talk about food security, a big issue clearly for the global south, energy security as well. And then later on today here in Bali, we're going to hear world leaders focus on the issue of growth in the economies around the world. We know they've been hit not just by that war, but also by the pandemic. They want to see a strong recovery, and it comes at a time in which there is economic strains, not just in our country, but in many others around the world as well. Interestingly, I'm going to get a chance to speak to the Prime Minister a little later. He's doing a round of interviews, and while clearly there will be focus on the big global issues facing the world and indeed the United Kingdom, there will be lots of focus too on some domestic issues ahead of that really, really important autumn statement we're expecting when he gets back home on Thursday.
That's our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, in Bali for us at the G20.
Now joining us in the studio is the political editor of the Tortoise news site, Kat Nealon. Back here in the UK, meanwhile, the paper's very much focusing on what is going to be a significant statement on Thursday, watched, I suppose, by the eyes of the world as well, and lots of hints and suggestions around what we can expect from that. Some new headlines emerging around councils in particular, and council tax being raised to pay for social care.
Yes, so we had already heard that it was expected to rise above the normal levels of 2.9%. It seems as though it could rise as much as 5%, which is a big jump up. But of course, we all know that after austerity and after certainly this last year, there's not much money left in the kitty for anyone. And of course, this is intended to deal with social care, which we had the levy being introduced, and that's now obviously going into NHS. So there's a lot going on that needs funding.
Absolutely, and not least when we're seeing two Tory councils in the front of the Guardian this morning warning the Treasury and indeed the Prime Minister that they are on the brink of bankruptcy, which in itself would be unprecedented, I think. What that means for the services that they provide in those two areas, Kent and Hampshire.
Yeah, so I think that the normal run of things would be that they don't actually enter bankruptcy. They can't because of the various commitments that they have. But what this means is that they would significantly wind down the kind of services that they provide. I wonder whether this is a bit about providing political cover for the rises. So you've got, obviously, both Conservative-run councils pleading in the letter for more funding. And so I do wonder whether there is some kind of, suggestion that this might be helpful to a Chancellor that is looking to raise the thresholds and the amounts that we all pay.
Yeah, there's going to be very little good news in this statement.
Yes, we heard at the weekend Jeremy Hunt saying it was going to be a rabbit-free budget, which is, quite unusual. Chancellors love to keep something in their back pocket to the rabbit out of the hat to try and sell some of the more difficult policies. Jeremy Hunt has been saying now for many weeks that it's going to be painful. And the other interesting framing, and of course we're seeing it in the G20 as well, is that it is a budget the sort of horrible stuff that is going to come out of the budget is caused by the war in Ukraine. This is, you know, you can see a lot of the rhetoric is around it is Putin's illegal invasion. That is the cause. The inflation is made in Ukraine. It's that kind of language to help people to understand, and also to very much say it's not our fault. It's not the Conservatives. It's not, for example, Liz Truss's mini budget that's caused all this. Although
stuff
of course,
we can't control.
Yes, I mean, I think it's probably fair to say it is a combination of things.
Yeah, and look, you say not a lot of good news. If you're a pensioner, I mean, Rishi Sunak saying that they are at the forefront of his mind, a heavy hint there that triple lock will be honoured, that commitment manifesto pledge, I should say, of 2019 will be honoured. And so lots of pensioners will be relieved to see that.
Well, I think this is quite interesting. Of course, he hasn't confirmed it, so there could still be some sort of movement around the edges on it. But I know that a lot of Conservative MPs were very concerned about this. I mean, I don't know if you remember, there was a big sort of hoo-ha about benefits being increased with inflation. A similar kind of movement was beginning around the pensions triple lock. As Chancellor, Sunak suspended it last year because it was when the furlough scheme finally ended and people were going back to work, and that kind of caused a big jump in earnings. And so he temporarily suspended it. There is concern amongst certainly some of what we would call blue wall Tories, but I'm sure in the red wall as well, that if you suspend it a second year, you lose the moral argument. If it's a lock, it's a lock. And so I think probably he has been hearing representations from a wide range of colleagues as to why that would be politically untenable.
Interesting. As always, Kat Neelan, political editor at Tortoise, thank you very much.
Yeah, well, let's get more then on the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, leading a ministerial team for Treasury questions in the House of Commons today ahead of Thursday's autumn budget announcement.
Yeah, to tell us more about what we can expect on Thursday is our political reporter, Catherine Forster. Take it away, Catherine.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a warm-up for the autumn statement, hotly anticipated on Thursday, of course. This will be at 11:30. Questions expected on everything from supporting families with energy bills to levelling up for support for local councils, things like offshore wind. More support for businesses, regulation, lighter regulation. So a huge range of questions for the Treasury, either Jeremy Hunt himself or perhaps John Glenn, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury. Of course, every day we're hearing floated things that may be in the autumn statement, and today, of course, the big news is possibly that our council tax bills are likely to rise to £2,000 or over for an average Band D property. That's because there is this huge hole in funding for social care. Now, at the moment, councils are allowed to add a 2.99% levy, which includes 1% for social care. Without consulting the public. It's likely that the government's going to put that up to 5%. So an average of an extra £100 probably on our bills, because, of course, the plan to fund social care through the National Insurance Levy was ditched under Liz Truss. That's one of the few things that actually went through from that budget. So as we've been hearing from Jeremy Hunt, eye-wateringly difficult decisions. He said in an interview at the weekend that he thought he had the worst job in the world, apart from Matt Hancock eating unmentionable parts of animals in the jungle. But one thing we can be sure of is that a cost of living crisis sending all our bills up. Household budgets are going to get increasingly squeezed, unfortunately, this winter. Though, of course, we have heard almost certainly the pensions triple lock is going to be protected, so pensions rising in line with inflation. It does seem likely too that benefits will be uprated in line with inflation, and more support for people on universal credit, on disability payments, and also an increase of 10% in the national living wage. So not all bad news, but it does feel pretty gloomy at the moment, and it's raining in Westminster to top it all.
Catherine, thank you very much indeed for that update. It's going to be a big political week, both at the G20 and, of course, that statement on Thursday. Full coverage here on GB News.
Yeah, just 12 minutes past 8. We're just hearing that Prince William has paid a surprise visit to the England team at St George's Park, which is where the England team trains. It's kind of the English FA Centre of Excellence. Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker joins us to tell us more about it. Cameron, what happened?
Yes, well, a special send-off by the Prince of Wales, of course, President of the Football Association, going to see the England players before they go off to Qatar. I believe it's today they're heading off, isn't it? Yes, so he joins the manager Gareth Southgate in revealing each number in front of the players and the Three Lions support team. And it was the first time each of them actually found out which number they would wear on their kit.
Really?
So a very special moment for them, being having a surprise visit by Prince William. Of course, Prince William's office says that there are no plans for him to attend any matches in Qatar, but it wouldn't surprise me that if England do rather well, or indeed Wales do rather well, that he might try and scramble out to Qatar for later matches.
And would Catherine go to Wales, or I'm testing you now. I don't know if it's rugby or one of them has more affiliation with Wales than the other, and sometimes they're up against each other. I was trying to think.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I was going to say so the Princess of Wales is patron of. Rugby.
Right, OK. That's where the rivalry comes in.
That's
right, I'm getting confused.
Yes.
Shall we talk about the King? Of course,
yes.
It's his birthday. Yes. Right, before we go to the King, we've just got pictures up to accompany this breaking story in relation to the Prince of Wales.
There we go.
There he is with Gareth
Can we hear anything? Oh, was a bit of sound?
Oh, we haven't got sound.
No sound.
But look,
But,
fabulous boost for them as they head off to Qatar.
Yeah, there we go.
Fabulous.
There we go. So they're getting their squad shirts there.
Finding out their numbers.
Yeah, I like that. And that was this.
And
this was this morning.
So this dropped this morning. We were found out this morning. I understand this probably happened yesterday.
Right. Yeah. So there they are getting their. So they're going to find out what numbers they get for the tournament, which starts on Sunday, and then England's first game is on Monday against. Iran. And there he is saying a few. Shame we can't hear what he had.
So England captain Harry Kane received his number 9 shirt, and Jordan Pickford's. Yeah, all of them received the shirts yesterday.
Fantastic. Yes. OK, so we've covered that off. We actually originally booked you, though, to talk about the King's birthday yesterday. And some of the mood music had been laid. I hadn't picked up on it, but essentially on his birthday, he chose this opportunity to, it's been described in some of the papers, as sidelining his brother and his son to make way for the Princess Royal, Princess Anne, and indeed Prince Edward.
I think it was a very diplomatic move from the King. It was a message, handwritten, that he delivered to the House of Lords, basically calling on Prince Edward and Princess Anne to deputise for him, added to the list of people who can deputise for him in a role as Councillor of State. Now, there was speculation, of course, that the original Councillors of State included Prince Andrew and Prince Harry, and if the King and Queen Consorts were to go abroad on a royal tour next year, one of those would have to take on a role as Councillor of State. So perhaps it's dealing with that constitutional problem.
OK, and how do you think this will be received? How significant is this really in terms of Prince Andrew? We're reading in lots of the papers that he's, perhaps plotting a comeback or surprised that this has been as long-lasting. I mean, this will be a blow for him.
It will be another blow for him, but of course we didn't see him at the Remembrance Sunday service at the Cenotaph. There are a number of public engagements which he usually would be at, which haven't involved him. So in terms of this particular move, I don't think it's going to come as a surprise for either Prince Andrew or the Duke of Sussex. Of course, many are questioning how the Duke of Sussex in particular can act as a Councillor of State, having moved to California with his wife, the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan. Of course, Andrew has arguably disgraced for obvious reasons, which I won't go into here. But I think it just widens the pool of members of the royal family who can act on behalf of the King.
Yeah, and he's also made himself the Park Ranger at Windsor Great Park. Is that right?
Yes.
He's kind of appointed himself.
Well, appointed himself, it was more of a tradition thing. So his father, Prince Philip, was the Ranger of Windsor Great Park for 70 years. King George VI was also Park Ranger as well, so it comes in a long line of royals who have taken on that role dating back 460 years.
Although, he doesn't spend that much time in Windsor comparatively, does he, to, of course, his mama and his son, the Prince of Wales, who's now living in Windsor. Perhaps it would have been better for William to take on that role, as he now lives in Windsor Great Park.
Well, perhaps, but I'm sure William one day will take on that. But also, of course, Windsor Great Park has lots of initiatives on sustainability, and that's something that the King is very much passionate about.
Cameron Walker, thank you with that breaking news and that update on the King as well. Appreciate it.
It is 17 minutes past 8. Let's bring you up to date with some of this morning's other top stories.
The Prime Minister has said pensions are at the forefront of his mind, strongly hinting he could keep the pensions triple lock in place in Thursday's autumn budget. State pensions increased by just over 3% this year after the triple lock was suspended.
The rate of unemployment in the UK has risen to 3.6% from, or it rose, I should say, to 3.6% from July to September. And that's up from 3.5% in the previous 3 months, according to figures out from the Office for National Statistics. Economic pressures are a factor in employers' decisions to hold back on recruitment, with the biggest driver behind the fall coming from hospitality.
Major supermarkets have co-signed a letter urging the government to expand free school meals to all children from families in England who receive universal credit. In the letter, the retailers warn of food insecurity rising in the coming months and call on Westminster to do more to protect children and to help struggling parents. Lots of views coming in, actually, on all sorts of things from council tax to pensions. Jason says, of course, the government will keep the triple lock. That's actually on pensions. They want to whack them with the massive council tax increase. They must stop these migrants. It's killing our country. The cost is eye-watering. It is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, Derek says on taxes, although important to discuss immediate impacts of the budget, it is also important to point out and discuss effects that a freeze on tax thresholds will have, what they call fiscal drag. These have already been frozen for many years, pushing lower and middle earner worker units into higher tax bands or to pay tax for the first time. The fallout of this will last for years to come and could affect pensioners who will have to pay tax on pensions.
What are you talking about? £2,000 average council tax. I'm already paying £3,000 per year in Northamptonshire, so it seems above average there. And Colin says, once again, we are penalised for mismanagement by our government, by huge tax rises to come. In the meantime, we're throwing £7 million a day away on illegal migrants. What a hopeless set of leaders we have. Do keep all your thoughts coming in this morning. We'll try and get as many of those read out as we can.
It is just coming up to 20 past 8. After the break, we'll be finding out why over 65s are putting a strain on sexual health services.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's 8:23. Welcome back to the programme. Lots more still for you this morning. From celebrities to politicians, it seems accusations of bullying are rife at the moment. So at 8:45, we're asking if we are actually setting the right example for kids as we mark Anti-Bullying Week.
And at 9:15, royal author Katie Nicholl will be here as reports swell that the King is attempting to sideline Harry and Andrew. Remember, you can join in any of the conversations this morning. We do love hearing from you. GB Views at gbnews.uk or tweet us at GB News.
Now, sexual health services are at breaking point due to funding cuts and soaring demand, and this increase is being attributed particularly to those over the age of 65.
The local government association warned without extra funding there could be an increase in sexually transmitted infections.
Well, let's talk some more about all of this with Dr. Helen Lawal, who specialises in sexual reproductive health and contraception. Goodness me, we talk about all the strain on the services around up and down the country, but I mean, when it comes to sexual health, that absolutely has to be key, doesn't it, to people's health and well-being?
Absolutely, and I do feel it's often overlooked. It is an essential service. We need sexual and reproductive health services to prevent unwanted pregnancies, to make sure that women, particularly on the contraceptive side of things, which is where I work, have the autonomy over their fertility, and it's important for well-being. And from the sexual health perspective, if we're not providing adequate services, then we're going to see a rise in STIs. And actually, we've done really well. We've been working really hard, and we've had a fall in STIs over the past decade. And remember, when we talk about STIs, we do also mean things like syphilis, resistant gonorrhea, and HIV.
Why this particular concern about the sexual health of over 65s? Are you seeing that in your everyday practice?
Yeah, this concern has come from a 20% increase over a couple of years between 2017 and 2019. But that 20% increase still only brings the numbers to around 3,000 positive STI cases a year. So the numbers are still relatively low. Most of the cases we're seeing of STIs are in the younger population. However, there is an increase, and actually one of the worst cases I've ever seen of primary syphilis was in an over 65. So it is still really important that we do consider all age groups as accessing the service. So
whilst you're seeing this increase in demand, you're also seeing a number of services being slashed, which is obviously a bit of a perfect storm. What are the things that people, can do if they can't get access to a sexual health clinic? How can they manage their sexual health themselves? Is it something that GPs can help with, or, are there any sort of over-the-counter tests people can do?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think one of the reasons that we're seeing such an influx is because GP surgeries, particularly on the implant and coil contraceptive side of things, are stopped providing those services during the pandemic and haven't picked them back up again. So we are having to pick those back up again. And I've actually been employed into the service in Leeds as a GP with a specialist interest, purely to work through the backlog. I'm seeing women with implants and coils which have expired, 1 to 2 years ago. So people can access contraception in other ways. We provide online contraception services, so they can go online on our website. And in general, you can go online and order a swab or a urine test to check for chlamydia and gonorrhea. And also some online blood tests as well are available. And some pharmacists are providing contraception, especially the emergency contraceptive pill, if you do feel you are at risk of an unwanted pregnancy. But it's not going to be enough. We saw over 4 million patients in 2021. And so it's not going to be enough. What we need is more funding to be able to provide the services and prevent a negative impact on people's health and well-being.
And what would you say to those who are over 65 who feel there may be some stigma attached to coming forward when they have concerns about their sexual health?
Yeah, and I would be really sad if people were feeling that way. And what I would say to you is we are here, we are open, we're a very non-judgmental service. We're here to provide you with the care that you need. And if you don't feel comfortable coming into a sexual health clinic setting, you can still see your GP for the basic sexual health testing, which would be a swab or urine test and a blood test. So some people might feel more comfortable actually seeing their GP in that situation. But otherwise, our doors are open, and please do come forward. It's just as important we're seeing you as anyone else.
Yeah, although of course it's incredibly difficult to get face-to-face appointments with your GPs as well. So it is difficult out there for patients, that is for sure. Dr. Helen Lowell, thank you very much for shaking off the taboo and talking about what's sometimes a bit of an embarrassing subject. We do appreciate it.
It is 8:28 after the break. We'll be going through the papers with Norman Baker and Claire Pearsall.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking. My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for The Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Welcome back. Good to have you with us on Breakfast this morning. It is 8:32. Let's bring you up to date with the top stories this morning.
The Prime Minister has called on the Russian President to end the invasion of Ukraine. In his G20 Summit speech, Rishi Sunak addressed the Russian Foreign Minister, saying that the weaponisation of energy and food was totally unacceptable.
The rate of UK unemployment rose to 3.6% from July to September. That's up from 3.5% in the previous 3 months, according to the Office for National Statistics.
The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, says he'll travel to Qatar to attend the World Cup. This comes as he's faced criticism for telling gay fans not to protest whilst visiting the country where homosexuality is illegal.
Right, let's go through the papers with former Liberal Democrat Minister Norman Baker and former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. Welcome back, both of you. Norman, you want to talk about this extraordinary... Is it an interview or was he speaking in the Commons? George Eustace, a former government minister, saying that the UK's trade deal with Australia is not good for the UK.
No, this is in the Mail. It's not quite clear where he said this, actually, or maybe he just spoke to the journalist, but he called... he accused Liz Truss of shattering, it's the word he used, the UK's negotiating position to get a trade deal. And, of course, the background to this is that we, after Brexit, we lost our close relations with our closest trading partners, 4% drop in GDP as a consequence. The government was desperate to show it was global Britain to sign up some trade deals with other countries. Australia was first in line, and what he seems to be saying was that Liz Truss was so desperate in her role as International Trade Secretary to get a deal that she basically set a tight deadline, which then let the Australians dictate the terms. And George Eustace at the time was the Environment and Farming Minister, and there was a great deal of concern from the farming community that they were being sold down the river by this deal.
Yeah, no surprise then that he said the best bits were negotiated by DEFRA, the worst bits by the Department for Trade. But some of this language he's using about this trade deal, overall the truth of the matter is the UK gave away far too much for too little in return. We did not actually need to give Australia or New Zealand full liberalisation of beef and sheep. It's not in our economic interests to do so.
Well, I think he's absolutely right on that. And I think the whole basis of the promises made were that we weren't going to damage our farming community, we weren't going to minimise the animal welfare protections we got in this country, and that appears to be what we've done by signing this deal.
I want to get Claire's take on this, though. It's interesting that this is all being pinned on Liz Truss. I mean, obviously it was her portfolio at the time, but, you know, she's part of a cabinet. She's under Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. I mean, he was very much driving this desire for a deal post-Brexit, wasn't he? I mean, is George Eustace speaking out of turn by laying the blame all on Liz Truss's shoulders?
I think this just plays into how divided the Conservative Party still is, and George Eustace doesn't have a job. So I think there's a certain level of anger there, and he did say it in the House of Commons. So he did say it on the floor of the House of Commons, and he's sort of laying bare this civil war that still rages on. But you're right, Boris Johnson was Prime Minister at the time. I believe that between himself and Liz Truss, they wanted to have this wrapped up by the time of the G7 Summit, as it was then. They wanted to rush this through so they had something good to put out there. So I think perhaps the detail was a little lacking. It was put together very, very quickly. But I think what's more concerning is that you are seeing former ministers coming out now and laying out quite the disagreements that they have with the previous incumbents of Number 10. And that's a worrying thing. I thought we were supposed to be banding together and be in a proper grown-up government, but it doesn't appear to be. And I think that he is right with what he says. I don't think that he should really go out there and say it.
Okay. Interesting. Actually, Claire, what were you wanted page 8 of the Daily Mail, potholes.
Oh, you see, now this is the one thing that will unite everybody, their hatred for potholes. And I think the problem is with the weather at the moment, the particularly bad rainy weather that we've had has caused more potholes. And the problem is fixing them. And with councils, as we stated earlier, going into such severe financial turmoil, they may not have the money to fix the roads. So you're looking at the headline here was damaging 225 more cars per day. If you think that that's quite a proportion of cars on the road.
We're all going to need four-wheel drive, aren't we?
We're going to need something, but I think we also need our roads not to fall apart at any sign of weather.
Yeah.
You know, in this country, we're not very good with extremes of heat, with extremes of cold, with extremes of rain, wind, you name it. So why our roads are in such a poor state to begin with?
Well, with more extreme weather, surely that means there will need to be more investment in roads.
And who's going to bring that in?
Well, a pothole has appeared. The council's looking into it, as the old saying goes. This is actually quite serious for the councils, because if there are cars being damaged, they can sue the council for failure to maintain the roads. And it could actually cost the councils more money in paying out to drivers than it does to maintain the roads in the first place.
My goodness.
Speaking as a former Transport Minister with these matters on my in-tray, what many councils do is to patch and mend very cheaply, because that's all the money they've got. They mend the pothole, and within 3 weeks it's reappeared because they haven't mended it properly.
Yeah.
So this is a situation that's getting worse and worse and worse. We actually had in my time a pothole handout to councils to try to catch up with some of the damage that's been done. But if you look at the condition of roads in England, they're very poor now compared to how they used to be, and they're getting worse, the local roads.
Yeah.
The trunk roads, which are a government responsibility, are by and large very good condition, but the local roads are getting worse and worse.
Yeah, it feels like a metaphor, doesn't it, for Britain in 2022, the state of the roads. Norma, should we talk about Rupert Murdoch?
Yes.
He's giving truth-telling to Donald Trump. What's he saying? How has this been covered in the Eye?
He's saying, your White House dream is over. I'm not backing you at the next election if you want to stand. And, of course, Trump is supposed to be making what he calls a very big announcement tonight, which presumably means he is going to put himself forward. And Murdoch is saying, I'm not going to back you. I'll back Ron DeSantis if he stands, and I might even back a Democrat if you're the candidate. Well, I can understand that in a sense, because Trump, in my view, is damaged goods, and he shouldn't be allowed back anywhere near the White House after the riots on January the 6th. However, what annoys me is the idea that this 90-plus-year-old Australian can dictate to people whether or not they can be President or Prime Minister.
Does he need him?
Well, you may need him, because they do a lot of damage. You think about the headlines from The Sun over the years, which have been, the last person in Britain turned out the lights when Neil Kinnock was a candidate, for example. I mean, the newspapers in this country, many of the newspapers, don't report the news. They report the views of the proprietors, the editors, and they skew the news accordingly. And you saw on some of the papers a few weeks ago how they were saying that Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng were fantastic. These were the tax cuts you wanted. Now they're all saying how fantastic it is that Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt are following a Thatcherite policy. There's been as one of my friends said, actually, who works on one of the papers, they've got the memory of a goldfish and the morals of a scoundrel.
Yeah. Claire, Donald Trump is very popular with the grassroots Republicans. Maybe not so much with his party at the moment, or even with the media, with the mainstream media, but the grassroots Republicans love him. Do you?
I'm not a great fan. I've never have been. I think that it was an interesting experiment for the United States. I think they needed something to shake up their politics, but perhaps not somebody quite as divisive as Donald Trump. And I think it is important to have somebody like Rupert Murdoch. It's not just the newspapers within the United Kingdom, but of course the media frenzy that is in the United States, which plays a huge part in getting somebody elected. If you look at the likes of Fox News, who are very, very pro-Trump, if Murdoch starts turning off the taps to that, then your outlets are going to be very, very limited. I think Donald Trump is probably hedging his bets a little bit with 24. You can float it out there, see what people think. But the Republicans don't have anybody else that would really get that level of support in the United States that he does.
You don't think DeSantis could be that person? Because you could already see that Trump feels threatened by DeSantis because he's already started attacking him.
He does, but there are a lot of people who still think that Donald Trump had that election stolen from him, and I'm not sure that they would
most of the candidates, in fact, almost all of the candidates who ran last week on the belief that the election was stolen, didn't win, which is a resounding rejection of Trumpism from across the electorate, from within the Republicans as well.
Well, absolutely, and that's quite an interesting thing to have a look at. And this is why it'd be interesting to see what he says tonight and how he says it. It may be a case of, I love you all, but no, I can't do this, I need to hand over to somebody else, and he gives that endorsement. It's going to be the Donald Trump show, whatever he says, and we're all going to be talking about it for at least the next 48 hours, which is what he always wants.
And one of the benefits of this country as opposed to America is that the newspapers can say what they want and they can take whatever lines they want, but the broadcast media, including GB News, has to be balanced by law. And if it's not balanced by law, then Ofcom will come in and shut you down, as it did with Press TV, the Iranian-backed television. That's not the case in America, as Claire says, with Fox TV, which is biased beyond belief in favour of Trump, or it has been. You wouldn't get away with that over here.
Yeah, absolutely. Quite right. Thank you for pointing that out. Claire, shall we talk about a story that is terrible to snigger? We were having a bit of a snigger in the advert break about this increase in demand for sexual health advice in the over 65s. Why not? Lots of these people coming out of long-term relationships and rediscovering their sex lives. This is in The Guardian, page 6.
Yeah, and I think we can't deny people are living longer. You know, we're not talking about some very, very old people, as we were talking about in the advert break, but these are people in the prime of their life. And quite interestingly and quite worryingly is the increase in STIs, a 20% increase. And you kind of think of an older generation, you should know better. To put yourself at that kind of level of risk of getting an STI. But it just shows how our life is evolving, and I think it's always an interesting way to look at it. When I was younger, I used to think somebody of 30 was ancient and past it, and then when you get to that age, you realise that that's not quite so
isn't
true.
it?
And I think we need to not be quite so sniggery as we have been.
Yeah,
because these people are at the prime of their life.
I was going to say we'll be 65 before we know it, and then I look to you, Norman.
Indeed,
but we were...
65. And I always think people who are about 10 years older than whatever age I am are past it, but that goes up over time.
Yeah, it's all relative, isn't it?
It's all relative.
It's all relative. And actually, Norman, page 8 to 9 of The Sun, LGBTQ jet for Qatar trip. Pride of Lions. What's this all about?
Well, this is an interesting idea that the England football team has decided to fly into Qatar in a plane which is a rainbow plane, deliberately making a sort of pro-LGBT point that the rights of gay people should be respected. Now, the interesting thing here, I mean, first of all, I think Qatar is way out of line with Western values on these matters. But the issue is whether or not we have the right to expect to carry on in a foreign country in the way we would do at home, or whether we should respect the laws in that country. And when I was in Saudi Arabia, for example, there are no Christians, or no Christians openly worshipping, and you couldn't have a Christian church, and you had to go to the mosque, or that was it. But over here, of course, we've got mosques as well as churches, which I think is fine, because people should be allowed to be free with their religion. So should we respect that view that Qatar has set down, although we disagree with it ourselves, or should we say no, we don't accept that, we're going to make a protest while we're over there, which is what the England team's doing by using
They do adhere to Sharia law in Qatar, don't they? And homosexuality is illegal.
You can get the death penalty for it.
I get it. So you were talking about Western values. They're Western values because they're in the West. These are not. Qatar
That's right. So the issue is whether or not our Western values, in a sense, are universal, or whether we should abandon them, as James cleverly appears to say, the Foreign Secretary, when we go over there, not talk about it. It's a hard job for him, of course, being at the World Cup, isn't it?
Yeah, on a technical point, I think that was a picture that... I don't know if that was an actual picture of the jet that we put up.
I couldn't see a rainbow. I was looking for a rainbow.
I couldn't see a rainbow either.
It's called the rainbow.
It's called the rainbow.
It's called the rainbow. It's not going to have
a rainbow on it. It's
well
just
done
the name
for
of
clarifying that, Claire. Thank you. Let's end on this lovely story. Absolutely the highlight of the morning. Nice one to end on as well. Inside the Sun, Claire. This is right up my sort of thing my son would do. Tell us the story.
This is a boy of 9 who managed to trick his dad into buying a puppy after taking his mum's phone and impersonating her in a bunch of WhatsApp messages.
Genius.
And I just think this is absolutely brilliant because he was using words that he thought that his mum would use to his dad, and it obviously worked because his father then did get the puppy. But he's been using things like "hi, hun" and "love" and putting little X's at the end of messages. And it ends with the father saying, "I'm definitely going to talk to my wife in the future. Maybe we'll set up a code word." And you think, when you're having that kind of discussion, that we all send messages all of the time, but actually a phone call sometimes wouldn't go amiss if it's something like this. But they've got themselves an 18-month-old Cocker Spaniel to join their family. So this little lad, Noah, I think, deserves some proper brownie points.
Yeah.
That was a pretty good game.
He's very clever.
Hang on, so he deceived his dad, and his dad did buy him the puppy anyway?
It does say something for the dad's not perhaps thinking that through. The family had discussed previously getting another dog. They already have one. They were talking about getting another one, and this rescue dog appeared, and they were discussing it. It wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment purchase, but I think it does show the difference between women and men. The mum wanted to think about it a little bit further, but Dad just went, oh, actually, no, I'll go ahead and do it. And it was the one message, Kev, just get one. Kids are crying. And that was enough for the dad, and then off he went.
Isn't that a great headline on The Sun? Sells the dad a pup.
Yeah, it works on many levels.
It does. It's a great headline.
Yeah.
Genius. Claire Pearsall, Norman Baker, thank you. It's been a pleasure, as always. See you again soon.
8:47 from politicians to celebrities. Accusations of bullying seem commonplace at the moment. And as we mark Anti-Bullying Week, a new study has found that a quarter of children are bullied frequently.
Well, the Anti-Bullying Alliance is now calling on adults to think about the example that they are setting for children. Joining us now is the director of the Anti-Bullying Alliance, Martha Evans, and I'm pleased to say Sammy Austin-Jones, an anti-bullying ambassador with the Diana Award, also joins us and is 15 years old. So listen, very good morning to you. I'll start with you, Sammy, because, you know, whenever we adults think about young people experiencing bullying, it instantly, I think, for most people, makes them feel very protective of a young person. What's been your own experience of bullying?
So when I was younger, I was actually bullied verbally myself by someone in my year. And it was just something that was continuous all the time. And then I told my parents about it. We mentioned it to the school. They didn't do anything at first, but then later on, they stood up and it completely stopped, and I never saw the person again.
How were you not able to see that person again, given you were still in that school environment?
Well, they didn't really speak to me anymore. I still kind of saw them occasionally, but it was kind of... It was kind of near the end of year 6, so I moved in secondary school. So I was actually able to avoid them, and I never had to deal with the bullying again.
Well, that's fantastic that was nipped in the bud then. I want to bring in Martha Evans, because the issue of bullying within childhood can have lifelong consequences, can't it? I mean, people are seriously damaged by what on the surface might just seem like playground name-calling, but it can be devastating for youngsters.
It can, and it can last well into adulthood. So we know that children who've been bullied, adults who've been bullied as a child, are more likely to have left schools without qualifications, to not be in a stable employment, to not be in a stable relationship, and to have mental health and well-being issues as an adult. So we know it's a really serious issue, which is why we're really pleased that you're covering it today.
Yeah, and there's also there must also be psychological consequences for children that have done the bullying and who they grow up to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And we found through our research today that actually children who bully and children who are being bullied are more likely to have a range of issues at school, including not feeling like they belong, not like getting on well with their teachers, not feeling safe at school. So we know that actually children who bully are incredibly unhappy, from what our research seems to show.
Yeah, what's the old saying that kind people don't act unkindly? Happy people don't act unkindly. So there's obviously something going on there, not to excuse it. I just want to ask you, Sammy, do you think that amongst the adults, you know, in public life anyway, and on this programme we talk a lot about politicians. Last week, a former education secretary, for example, got booted out of the cabinet for bullying allegations. We see celebrities being accused of it as well. Do you think we adults are setting a good example when it comes to bullying?
I think there has to be an improvement with everyone, and we all need to look... This is how everyone else wants to be treated. And I always think about the saying that I heard, don't face it alone.
Mm. And Sammy, when you hear about bullying at your school, is there a definition of bullying for you? Where does it go from a little bit of name ribbing, a little bit of teasing to bullying, or is bullying a subjective thing and it's completely defined by the person who feels they're experiencing it?
So for when I work with the Diana Award, we have like one definition that we look at, and when we see bullying in our school, we kind of assess it. Is it repetitive? Is it unkind? And then if it meets those kind of criteria, that's when we say look, this is likely bullying, and we then report it to the designated members of staff.
Should people be looking out for, Martha, if they think that their child might be being roughed up or bullied at school? And as we know, actually, it can even happen in your own home whilst your child is safe within your house, because there's so much cyberbullying now as well. What signs should parents be looking out for particularly?
I think you know your child best. So if you notice that your child is suddenly feeling withdrawn or isolated, or they're not their usual self, try and talk to them and find out what's going on. And it might be that they seem very anxious about going to school, or all of a sudden not wanting to go on their phone, or being really anxious to be with their phone. Those are the kinds of signs that your child might be being bullied. So the best thing to do is to have those conversations, and to not let the first time you talk about bullying be when your child comes to you and says that they're being bullied. Have those conversations about what a good friendship is, how we treat each other, and make sure that when we're talking about bullying, we're not talking about people having a falling out. It's really important that we allow children to have those kinds of arguments and disagreements and navigate that themselves. But when it's repetitive, when it's intentional, when it's hurtful, and it's going on for a long period of time, that's when it can be really damaging.
And final question, and this is to both of you: stand up to bullies or report them?
For me, I'd say always report it, because standing up, there's always the chance that it could go wrong and or it won't go according to plan, and even you could get in trouble. So it's always best to report it to a trusted adult, member of staff, parent, carer, whatever.
Yeah. Well, Sammy, you've got a wise head on your shoulders. Would you agree with that, Martha?
I do agree with that, and I think what's really important is that we, as adults and as other children who might be seeing bullying taking place, help children to reach out, and we can see it when it happens. So let's all reach out this anti-bullying week.
Absolutely. Listen, Martha Evans, Sammy, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming in, talking about this really important issue. We really appreciate it. It does make my blood boil. Absolutely makes my blood boil. I hate bullies. Absolutely hate bullies. Terrible.
8:53. We'll have more of the latest from the G20 after the break, but before that, let's find out how it's looking weather-wise.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. More wind and rain on the way this morning, and later on for northeastern areas, heavy rain in places, but brighter skies will follow in the west later. Areas of low pressure still dominating our weather at the moment. Those areas of low pressure sitting to the northwest, swinging at first an active band of rain in a weather front, which is likely to cause a few issues across southern counties of England, South Wales, as the rainfall accumulates to 30 or 40 millimetres in places. The wettest weather moving out of the way of these areas, though, pushing into the east of England, northern England, central and eastern Scotland by the afternoon. And once again, that will build up over some of the higher parts of eastern Scotland, Aberdeenshire, Angus, Perth and Kinross, likely to see 50 to 60 millimetres in places. That could cause some issues. Brighter skies, though, return to the west. 13 or 14 Celsius in the south, 11 or 12 in the north. And Northern Ireland sees a lovely afternoon, but for Wales and the southwest, any gaps between the rain short-lived, because further showers arrive here. Those showers spreading across most of the UK by the end of Wednesday, but the more persistent wet weather in the northeast, well, that lingers across Shetland, where the winds will really be ramping up during Tuesday and into Wednesday, gales or even severe gales. Otherwise, it's a blustery start for many on Wednesday. Some gaps in between the showers and some sunshine first thing. A fresher start for many, but not exactly cold. And we're going to see further showers arriving from the west and southwest through the day. So there's going to be frequent showers along the south coast for parts of Wales, western Scotland as well. But away from those showers, for many it's a fine afternoon. There'll be some sunshine out there, certainly looking brighter and drier compared with recent days. But for Shetland, we keep the very strong winds and the heavy rain. It will stay windy here throughout much of the rest of the week. Elsewhere, there'll be further spells of rain, followed by showers, followed by more rain. It will be blustery at times, but also temperatures will be coming down.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio,
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Rishi Sunak confronts Russia's foreign minister as he addresses the G20 Summit in Bali.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock. It's Tuesday, the 15th of November. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel and Paul. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
The Prime Minister has criticised Vladimir Putin for not attending the G20 Summit. In a speech, he challenged Russia's Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, the first time a British PM has faced a Russian government official since the start of the Ukraine war.
Sunak has also announced new defence projects, including what he calls the next generation of British warships, with 5 new vessels to be built for the Royal Navy at a cost of £4.2 billion.
Council tax will surpass £2,000 for the average household for the first time under new government plans. The increase, due to be unveiled on Thursday, would be used by councils to fund social care.
And a picture of the England football squad's been released as they prepare to head to Qatar today for the World Cup, and they'll play their first match against Iran next Monday.
Remember, you can drop us a line, get involved with any of the conversations we're having on the show this morning. gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at GBNews.
So our top story this hour, Rishi Sunak has warned Russia to get out of Ukraine and to end this barbaric war as he attends the G20 Summit in Bali.
Speaking as the summit began, the PM also criticised the absence of Vladimir Putin, directing his speech at the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. It's the first time a British Prime Minister has come face-to-face with a Russian official since the start of the war in Ukraine.
Well, our political editor Darren McCaffrey is in Bali for us and sent us this earlier on.
Well, the G20 here in Bali is well and truly underway, with world leaders gathering here this morning. Apart from one, of course, President Putin, who isn't here, but all the others are. And it has been the issue of Russia and Ukraine that has frankly dominated the opening remarks made by world leaders, with almost unanimous condemnation of the war in Ukraine, not least of all from our own Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who at those opening remarks said that it is very simple, that countries should not invade their neighbours, they should not attack civilian infrastructure and civilian populations, and they should not threaten nuclear escalation. Surely those are things we can all agree on. Rishi Sunak went on to say that it is notable that President Putin didn't feel able to join us here. Maybe if we had, he could have sorted things out, because the single biggest difference that anyone could make is for Russia to get out of Ukraine and end this barbaric war. Now, it must be said, we've also heard from, as I say, other G20 leaders today, many that have condemned the war in Ukraine, and even those that have previously been non-aligned, essentially sat on the sidelines, have also condemned some of the action. We heard from Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, saying that he wanted to see an end to this war as soon as possible. Now, all in all, those leaders are going to have meetings on the sidelines today as well. For example, Rishi Sunak is going to meet with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia a little later, though the big meetings for him are somewhat tomorrow's meeting, the Indonesian President, who is hosting this summit, but also the Prime Minister of India, it's reported, Narendra Modi, and then the big one, President Joe Biden as well. But it is fair to say it is the war in Ukraine and its consequences that so far dominated this summit. Talk about food security, a big issue clearly for the global south. Energy security as well. And then later on today here in Bali, we're going to hear world leaders focus on the issue of growth in the economies around the world. We know they've been hit not just by that war, but also by the pandemic. They want to see a strong recovery, and it comes at a time in which there is economic strains, not just in our country, but in many others around the world as well. Interestingly, I'm going to get a chance to speak to the Prime Minister a little later. He's doing a round of interviews, and while clearly there will be focus on the big global issues facing the world and indeed the United Kingdom, there will be lots of focus too on some domestic issues ahead of that really, really important autumn statement we're expecting when he gets back home on Thursday.
McCaffrey with that for us from Bali.
Joining us now in the studio is our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Tom, big week for Rishi Sunak. First of all, projecting himself on the world stage. He's got these bilateral meetings happening on the side. And then domestically at home, he's got the statement coming up on Thursday.
And I suppose the mission of Rishi Sunak in terms of how this is all playing domestically is to tie in these issues of global turbulence, the line that we've heard again and again from the government, that a third of the global economy has fallen now into recession, and indeed tie that into the need for the statement on Thursday, the pretty tough statement that we're going to be hearing from the Chancellor, most of our taxes going up and indeed public spending going down, the context, if you like, for that being laid by the Prime Minister over these next 2 days in Bali, talking, of course, about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, how that has challenged the world with energy prices, but also challenged the global south, particularly with food security as well, compounding all of those effects of the aftershocks of COVID. The opportunity that the Prime Minister has politically now is to stand shoulder to shoulder with many other world leaders, not least the President of the United States, whose country is also now in recession, not least many of those European countries that are feeling that heat from or feeling the lack of heat, really, from the lack of energy, and indeed show that we're all in this together. Of course, that's going to be challenging, of course, because the G20 is a much broader group of countries than, for example, the G7. The G7 quite ideologically aligned. Yes, there's differences here and there, but ultimately these are all advanced major economies. The G20 includes countries like China, like Russia, like Brazil, like Argentina. These are countries that have very different worldviews and potentially different approaches to the global challenges that all these countries are facing. But also, crucially, some of these countries are facing very different challenges at the moment. Of course, 2/3 of the global economy is not in recession. And where do those places tend to be? The developing parts of the world, not so the developed parts. So big challenges, but also a communications opportunity for the Prime Minister here to show that we're all in this together.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk, obviously, about, I think the Chancellor today, is he's in front of one of the select committees, and we'll be hearing more about what we can expect on Thursday. We've been warned, haven't we? There's going to be no rabbits out of a hat, no sort of little sweeteners expected, although, of course, there is the triple lock, which we're expecting, and lots of hints, at least from the Prime Minister, that pensioners are in the forefront of his mind, that this is going to be honoured. A cost of £11 billion to taxpayers. What are Labour saying about this particular policy? Because I know on the front of the eye, lots of talk about going after Amazon and non-doms instead of getting low earners to fund these sorts of problems.
Yes, the Labour Party has said right through this that they would stand by the triple lock on pensions, which is potentially ironic, as after all, it was a Conservative government that brought in the triple lock back in 2010, back when inflation was very, very low, and indeed wage growth wasn't seen to be particularly high as well. It was a much more affordable promise back then in that political circumstance. Now it's been much more contentious, of course. Over the last 3 Prime Ministers, there's been a bit of hokey-cokey going on with the triple lock. First, Liz Truss committing to it, then Jeremy Hunt saying maybe not, then committing to it again, and then once more in the balance. Now it looks like it will be committed to again. My gosh, there's been a lot of dancing around over the point of this, but ultimately it does look like more probable than not that this will be committed to by the government. After all, pensioners are frankly, in electoral terms, a very important group. These are people who turn out and vote and are a crucial part of the government's winning coalition of voters. With the Labour Party, though, they are pointing to these retail offers, these things that poll and focus group quite well, going after non-doms, going after investment income. Now, in terms of the actual money that you'll be able to raise from these, the number of non-doms are very, very small. And, of course, non-dom status does mean that you do pay tax in the UK on UK income, just not on foreign income. So tweaking the rules on that is not going to raise a huge amount of money. But, of course, it is something that polls very well because people... well, not many people are non-doms, for example, and it's hard to see the economic effects. It's a good soundbite, and the Labour Party will be coming back to this, not least because it puts the Prime Minister in a little bit of hot water. After all, his family's non-dom status was a contentious issue in the past, of course, given up in the last year or so, but still at the forefront of some voters'
So plenty
minds.
to chew over in the briefing at 9:30.
Certainly.
Who you got on?
Well, we'll be looking at actually a new campaign that's been launched just this week about growth in the United Kingdom. Liz Truss's administration was all about growth. That came tumbling down. Perhaps some of her solutions were not right for the time, but the question of growth seems to be one that is really affecting the whole country. And there is a new campaign being launched by some people who've left Number 10 and are looking at cross-party solutions to try and boost the growth rate of the United Kingdom to avoid some of these tricky conversations that no doubt we'll be having on Thursday about higher taxes or lower spending. If you get growth up, you don't need to have so many of those tricky decisions. So I'll be talking to the founder of this campaign, an ex-Number 10 guy, who's going to have some really interesting things to say about growth.
Look forward to that. 9:30, the briefing with Tom Harwood. Thank you very much indeed.
And then after that, at 10, it's Bev Turner with Bev Turner Today. Bev, what's on today?
See what they did there. I know, it's creative, isn't it? I can't wait. We have got a packed show today at 10 o'clock. It's a big day, of course, in the NHS. Steve Barclay is going around. He's talking about what's going to happen now. Are we going to have strikes this winter? We're running a Twitter poll to find out whether you think the NHS staff should be working harder or should they be striking. I've got a very busy studio today. I've got Richard Tice from the Reform Party who's coming in. His party, brand new, is only 1 percentage point behind the Greens now in terms of who people would vote for. I'm going to be asking whether a new party can ever break through the two-party politics we have in this country. We're going to be talking about Ukraine with expert Danny Armstrong, and we're going to be talking down the lens to a resident of Kherson, a woman, the newly liberated city. How is she finding life out there today? We've also got in the studio the amazing Dr. John Campbell. Now, you might be saying, who is Dr. John Campbell? Dr. John Campbell is a nurse practitioner and a teacher who does YouTube videos from his spare room with an overhead projector and a pencil, and yet he's got 2.5 million million subscribers on YouTube, and his videos have been watched more than 500 million times. We're talking about the rise of people seeking out great information, and also the fact that he's often threatened with censorship. And I've got a panel, as usual. We're going to be doing 2 hits with them, talking about some really interesting stories of the day. I've got Katie Nichols, we've got Michael Heaver and Emma Webb from the Common Sense Society. We're going to be talking about all sorts of interesting things, including if you were Jeff Bezos or you had those sorts of millions, how much would you give away? It's all happening at 10 o'clock here on GB News.
Sounds brilliant, Bev. Thank you very much indeed. And indeed, Katie Nicholl will be appearing on our show first as well. She'll be talking about Charles reportedly getting rid of his brother and his son when it comes to being councillors of state. All the details after the break.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's 9:16. Prince William has paid a surprise visit to England's World Cup squad ahead of their flight to Qatar this morning. The head of the FA helped distribute their all-important team numbers for the tournament.
And the Prince of Wales has no plans to attend the World Cup at the moment, according to Kensington Palace, although they say his schedule's too tight. I suspect that could change if England did really, really well. But let's
or Wales.
Now. Or Wales, indeed,
Or
the Prince of Wales. Let's talk to the royal author and royal editor for Vanity Fair, Katie Nicholl. Good morning and welcome to the programme. First of all, then, on the Prince of Wales and this will be a big boost before they head off to the World Cup.
Oh, it will. I mean, I think for the Prince of Wales to turn up and give every single member of the team their shirts and a personal photo opportunity before they head off to Qatar is a real mood booster. I mean, of course, William loves football. We know he's a big Aston Villa fan, and of course he's the president of the FA, and he's hugely behind the team and behind the game. I think people will wonder why he's not going out to Qatar.
Yeah,
he always
I thought that
attends.
was
I think
weird.
most people will think
Especially
that's a little
for
unusual.
England-Wales. England are playing Wales, literally 2 birds, 1 stone.
Is it just too controversial?
Well, I think possibly it's less of that. He's got a really busy November-December schedule. The big focus of the Prince of Wales is the Earthshot Awards in Boston, end of November, beginning of December. So there is a real clash. But, this tournament, it runs from the 20th of November through to the 18th of December. There's plenty of time for him to go out. I think if England do well, and fingers crossed they do.
When
England do well,
Wales.
possibly there'll be a royal visit, because I do think that that support, particularly as president of the FA, it matters to the players, it matters to the public, and it's a real royal seal of approval.
And he's a nice guy. Prince William, I imagine the players like him.
I think you look at the chemistry when he's meeting them. They like him.
Yeah,
they like him. They really value what he does for the sport and for the industry, and they'll want him to be there.
Yeah,
absolutely. Should we talk about the King and the steps being taken on his birthday yesterday, very diplomatically in his letter to the Lords, but effectively sidelining his brother and his son in favour of his other siblings to be his deputies?
Well, this is the whole issue of councillors of state, and councillors of state's duty is to step in when the monarch is not able to be there, and we know that the King is going to be away quite a lot next year, is going to be very, very busy, and there will certainly be instances where he can't be here and he's going to need a substitute. At the moment, or until yesterday, those substitutes were going to be the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, and Prince Harry. Well, of course, one has now been forced out of public life and royal duties, and the other is, thousands of miles away, forced themselves out across the pond. And so this has been a big issue that people have been wondering, well, what's going to happen? Because there's a real practical element to all of this. And I think the King, as you say as well, has found a really diplomatic way of sidestepping a potentially awkward situation. I think it's interesting that he hasn't stripped Andrew and Harry of those roles. They remain councillors of state. I think it's very diplomatic. But what he's done is he's made it clear that he's very content for his sister, the Princess Royal, Princess Anne, and Prince Edward to stand in, and I think that will be far more comfortable for most people.
So effectively, he's got a bigger subs bench.
He's got a bigger subs bench, and that does throw up that and it's interesting you use the word subs bench, neatly tying in with football. But the Queen used to refer to her extras as her substitutes, and that's exactly what they are. And I think it's interesting that we are seeing Princess Anne having a bigger profile, the Wessexes as well, because we know about Charles's plans or his vision for that slimmed-down monarchy, and yet he clearly does need the support of these extra working royals.
And I think it really was quite stark on Sunday at the Cenotaph. The streamlined monarchy really looks rather streamlined now without Her Majesty the Queen as well. And you wonder, should we be seeing the Princess Royal and the Earl of Wessex up on the balcony with the Queen Consort and the Princess of Wales? Because it used to be much more crowded when we used to have the Duchess of Sussex there. Are there too few of them, maybe?
Well, I think if you're looking at the number of engagements that the royals carry out each year, they are stretched. And so I think perhaps there's been a bit of a rethink in terms of that absolute scaled-back monarchy that Charles had envisaged, that whole image of the Fab Four. It can't just be the four of them, and that's obviously the King and the Queen Consort, the Prince and Princess of Wales. Anne has more than proved herself over the years. She's diligent, she's loyal, she's the second hardest working royal after Charles. And the Wessexes are more than happy to step up to the plate. Well, why would you say no to them? And I think that's what we're seeing, a slight change of tack. And, councillors of state is a big responsibility. And as you say, there are many, many engagements that need to be covered. So why would you not use these subs if you've got them?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, just before you go, are we going to see? Are we likely to see the King around Great Windsor Park more now he's made himself the park ranger?
Well, I think absolutely. I mean, I think you're going to be seeing a lot more of the Waleses around Windsor Park because, you know, Windsor Castle is still there as a family home, and I think that'll happen. But the Prince of Wales celebrated his 74th birthday yesterday, quietly and below the radar. The King. I'm so sorry. Yes, I mustn't do this.
I've done it so many times.
Sorry.
So easy.
Apologies. The King celebrated his 74th birthday, and we had the announcement that he is going to be the new ranger for Windsor Great Park. And of course, that was a role that Prince Philip had for the best part of 70 years. It's a beautiful picture. It's taken by one of their favourite photographers, Chris Jackson. That wonderful autumnal sunlight coming in. And, you know, I suppose the King at his happiest in nature and surveying his kingdom. And so, yes, we are going to see him a lot more around Windsor Great Park. The Duke of Edinburgh did a lot. He introduced red deer into the park. He changed a lot of how the park was run. And you know, the King has had a lot of experience running the royal estates. He took over Sandringham. It's going to be interesting to see what he does in Windsor.
Yeah, just needs a kids' playground. That's what it needs in Great Windsor Park.
You might, yeah, well, because the one at Sandringham was wonderful. The one the Duchess of Cambridge and now the Princess of Wales set up was beautiful. So you might possibly see something like that. I think what we've seen with Charles is he likes to put his stamp on things, whether that's, you know, organic farming or making cider or whatever it is he's doing. And I think we'll see him definitely put his own stamp on Windsor Great Park. But the Duke of Edinburgh was passionate about it and did a lot for sustainability. So Charles will be looking at what next.
Katie, finally, we were talking about the cenotaph on Sunday. There are pictures that emerged of Prince Harry at Pearl Harbor over the weekend without a poppy on. What was your reaction to that and what do you read into that?
Well, these pictures were not staged pictures, so I think it's a vast improvement on what happened a couple of years ago when they were at the LA cemetery, and, you know, that really just looked like a terrible staged photo opportunity. I think most people will look at those pictures and think, isn't it a bit sad? He's not in uniform. He's marking a day that's clearly important to him as a veteran, but not in the way that perhaps he should be. And, of course, he doesn't have a wreath laid on his behalf at the cenotaph. He's completely ostracised from the royal element of Remembrance Sunday. So I suppose he has to find a way of doing it. And that secret trip to Hawaii was his way of doing it. But it does, I think, just highlight how far removed he is from Britain, from our own Remembrance Sunday, and how important that is to most people over here.
Yeah, and that distance getting further and further.
It is. You do get that sense.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for your time, Katie.
Thank you, Katie. Always lovely to see you again next week. Thank you for your company. Thank you for your emails. So many of them. And we could probably squeeze in a couple more before we go. We've been talking about this morning council tax and expectation that it'll rise to an average of £2,000. Dan says we live on 2 state pensions, but £2,000 council tax is a heavy burden on that income. Our mistake was to be frugal enough to have some savings, meaning we don't qualify for any benefits.
Malcolm, morning to you, Malcolm, says great, more money for local councils, which is Stockton. A Labour-run high-tax already money-wasting council always raise the tax above inflation and a high levy for a special measures police force. More on council tax coming up with Tom Harwood in the briefing, and we're back tomorrow from 6 a.m.
See you tomorrow.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. More wind and rain on the way this morning. And later on for northeastern areas, heavy rain in places, but brighter skies will follow in the west later. Areas of low pressure still dominating our weather at the moment. Those areas of low pressure sitting to the northwest, swinging at first an active band of rain in a weather front, which is likely to cause a few issues across southern counties of England, South Wales, as the rainfall accumulates to 30 or 40 millimetres in places. The wettest weather moving out of the way of these areas, though, pushing into the east of England, northern England, central and eastern Scotland by the afternoon. And once again, that will build up over some of the higher parts of eastern Scotland, Aberdeenshire, Angus, Perth and Kinross, likely to see 50 to 60 millimetres in places. So that could cause some issues. Brighter skies, though, return to the west. 13 or 14 Celsius in the south, 11 or 12 in the north. And Northern Ireland sees a lovely afternoon, but for Wales and the southwest, any gaps between the rain short-lived because further showers arrive here. Those showers are spreading across most of the UK by the end of Wednesday, but the more persistent wet weather in the northeast, well, that lingers across Shetland, where the winds will really be ramping up during Tuesday and into Wednesday, gales or even severe gales. Otherwise, it's a blustery start for many on Wednesday. Some gaps in between the showers and some sunshine first thing. A fresher start for many, but not exactly cold. And we're going to see further showers arriving from the west and southwest through the day. So there's going to be frequent showers along the south coast for parts of Wales, western Scotland as well. But away from those showers, for many it's a fine afternoon. There'll be some sunshine out there, certainly looking brighter and drier compared with recent days. But for Shetland, we keep the very strong winds and the heavy rain. It will stay windy here throughout much of the rest of the week. Elsewhere, there'll be further spells of rain, followed by showers, followed by more rain. It will be blustery at times, and also temperatures will be coming down.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget